You've been lied to about peace. They told you it comes from silence, from escaping problems, from pretending everything's fine. But if that were true, why does your mind still race when the world goes quiet? Why does rest feel so far away, even when you're exhausted? Why do your thoughts still keep you prisoner at night, whispering what-ifs and regrets into the dark? The truth is, peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you train for, and Buddhist wisdom holds the map. For thousands of years, monks, teachers, and wanderers have learned how to calm the storm inside, not by running from life, but by sitting right in the middle of it, without breaking. Not by forcing stillness, but by letting go. Not by fixing everything, but by needing less. Tonight, you're not just going to fall asleep. You're going to return to yourself. You're going to hear teachings that melt stress, slow the mind, and soften the tight places in your heart. Not with fluff, not with empty words, but with truth. The kind that sinks in like warm water and stays with you when you wake up. By the time this ends, something inside you will feel different. Lighter, clearer, softer. You'll breathe easier. You'll think less. And sleep won't feel like a battle. It'll feel like coming home. This isn't just another sleep audio. This is a soul reset. Are you ready? Let's begin. And now that the noise has started to fade, now that the body has softened just enough to feel the bed holding it up instead of the weight of the day, this is where the shift begins. This is where the soul hears what the world drowns out, not with effort, not with volume, but with stillness. Tonight, we begin with one of the most overlooked truths in Buddhist wisdom. Not every river rushes, and not every life needs to. There is a quiet power in the rivers that don't fight for speed, a deeper wisdom in the current that takes its time. Most of us have been trained to believe that fast is better, that productivity equals progress, that the more we do, the more we are. But nature, in its infinite calm, never rushes, yet everything gets done. Trees grow, flowers bloom, rain falls, not on schedule, not by force, but because that's the way of things. That is Dharma. That is the natural unfolding of what is meant to be. Buddhism teaches that suffering often comes from resisting this natural pace, from rushing when we need to rest, from sprinting through stages of life we haven't fully entered, from demanding clarity before we've allowed stillness. The river doesn't demand the mountain move faster. The mountain doesn't beg the sun to rise quicker. Everything flows according to its time. Yet we, humans, push, pull, and panic when life slows down, as if stillness means failure, as if quiet means weakness. But in the Buddhist view, slow is not a punishment. Slow is sacred. One of the earliest teachings of the Buddha is about right effort, not maximum effort, not relentless energy, but right effort, wise energy. Effort that is aligned, not frantic. Think about it. A river that rushes constantly erodes its own banks, but a gentle stream nourishes everything it touches without destroying itself. That's how the soul works too. When we move too fast, we burn out. We stop noticing. We stop feeling. We stop being. But when we slow down, we begin to align with life as it actually is, not as we want it to be, not as we fear it is, but as it is, simple, alive, enough. The Buddhist monks who walk barefoot through forests, who sweep temple grounds with quiet devotion, who eat in silence and sit for hours doing what looks like nothing. They understand something modern life often forgets. Rushing is not peace. Hurrying is not purpose. And faster is not better when it comes to healing, to growth, to awakening. There is no such thing as instant enlightenment. Even the Buddha took time. Even the Buddha paused under the Bodhi tree and waited, not for answers, but for everything false to fall away. In your own life, the pressure to go faster may not sound like screaming. It may whisper. It may show up as that feeling of falling behind, that urge to catch up, to prove, to push. But here's the deeper truth. There's nothing to catch up to. Your path unfolds at the pace your soul can bear. And trying to rush the process is like yelling at the moon to rise sooner. The moon doesn't listen, and neither does truth. Truth arrives when the noise ends, and noise only ends when we stop feeding it. The river flows not because it forces itself forward, but because gravity and time guide it. The same is true for peace. Peace does not come because we chase it. It comes because we stop chasing everything else. The rush to be understood, the race to succeed, the sprint towards security. All of it becomes noise when the soul just wants rest, when the soul just wants to breathe again. There's a famous Zen teaching that says, sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. This isn't laziness. It's presence. It's surrender. It's the recognition that when we stop interfering, life takes care of itself. The heart knows how to beat, the lungs know how to breathe, the earth knows how to turn. You don't have to force alignment, you have to allow it. That's the beauty of going slow. It doesn't mean you're lost, it means you're listening. Monks often talk about effortless effort. It sounds contradictory until you live it. Effortless effort is what happens when action flows from peace instead of panic, when decisions come from clarity instead of fear, when movement happens not because you're chasing, but because you're being moved by something deeper. Think of a leaf on water. It doesn't decide where to go, but it doesn't resist either. It trusts the current, not blindly but openly. That's what it means to live in the rhythm of Dharma. When you align with the pace of nature, life stops being a competition. You stop comparing your timeline to others. You stop measuring your worth by your speed. And most importantly, you stop rushing through moments that were meant to be savored, like the warmth of your blanket right now, the breath that's slower than it was an hour ago, the stillness between each heartbeat. None of this can be rushed. None of it needs to be. In Buddhism, there's a concept called samatha, the calming of the mind. It's not about turning your brain off. It's about letting your thoughts settle, like mud in a glass of water. If you shake the glass, everything gets cloudy. But if you set it down, clarity returns on its own. That's the river that doesn't rush. That's the mind that heals. That's the soul that finally rests. You don't need to fix everything before you fall asleep. You don't need to find all the answers. You don't need to force your healing. You just need to soften, to stop pressing, to stop proving. There is no medal for being exhausted, no prize for pushing through pain. What matters is presence, not in the future, not in the past, but here, now, exactly as you are, breathing, listening, letting this moment be enough. The river is wise because it trusts the path beneath it. It doesn't question every rock. It doesn't resent every bend. It doesn't fear the quiet pools where nothing moves. It just flows, sometimes fast, sometimes barely at all, and still it arrives. Still it nourishes. Still it fulfills its purpose without ever rushing. So the next time your mind tells you to speed up, to do more, to fix it all before midnight, pause, feel your breath, listen to the stillness under the noise, and ask, what if I let this be easy? What if I didn't have to prove anything tonight? What if peace wasn't waiting on the other side of accomplishment, but right here, underneath all the rushing? Because here's the truth you may have forgotten. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are in the middle of unfolding, like the river, like the leaf, like the breath, and everything meaningful takes time. Let the current carry you. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that peace never comes from forcing the tide. It comes from flowing with it. So, as your body softens even more now, as your thoughts begin to slow like the river at dusk, remember, the soul heals best when it's not rushed. Let this night be a gentle one. Let every moment stretch out without urgency, and know that even in stillness, you are moving forward. Not all rivers rush. Some simply arrive, calm, whole, and exactly on time. And once the current slows, once the river stops asking where it's going, something unexpected begins to rise. Silence. Not the silence of emptiness or absence, but the kind that listens, the kind that holds, the kind that reveals things no noise ever could. When life no longer demands speed, it starts to speak in softer tones. And now, we listen, not with ears, but with presence. Not for answers, but for what has always been beneath the words. In the early hours of the morning, when the sun hasn't yet fully opened its eyes, monks begin their slow walk through village streets. Heads bowed, hands holding bowls, feet bare against the cool ground. There are no chants, no requests, no loud expressions of need, just a presence, just stillness. Just the subtle sound of robes brushing against skin and the faint tapping of footsteps on stone. This is the practice of almsgiving. And at the heart of it, silence. This silence isn't accidental. It's intentional. It's part of the ritual. In Buddhist tradition, monks do not ask for food with words. They simply offer the bowl. And the lay people do not speak either. They place food gently into the bowl without chatter, without performance, without expectation of thanks. There are no "you're welcomes," no "have a good days," no forced politeness. Just one soul giving, another receiving, and silence surrounding it like sacred breath. In this silence is a kind of fullness that words often destroy. Because the moment something sacred is named, it begins to shrink. Like steam, the moment you try to grab it, it slips through your fingers. That's what this silence protects. It holds space for reverence, for awareness, for a deep connection between giver and receiver that doesn't rely on anything being explained. Western culture often fears silence. It's seen as awkward, as emptiness to be filled, as an uncomfortable pause in conversation. But in Buddhist practice, silence is not a lack of communication. It's a higher form of it. It is communication without ego, without control, without noise. It is the moment when gratitude doesn't need to be spoken to be felt, when presence becomes enough, when simply being there without distraction or decoration is the most honest offering. The silence between bowls is not blank space. It is presence distilled to its purest form. It is the sound of the heart opening without the mouth moving. It is the soul receiving without reaching. In that moment, the giver offers not just rice or fruit, but attention, presence, sincerity. And the monk receives not just food, but nourishment of another kind. Nourishment that doesn't enter the stomach, but the spirit. The Buddha once said that the best way to express gratitude is not through words, but through living rightly. In other words, gratitude is not something to be said, it is something to be lived. And the silence between bowls is where this begins. It is where we stop performing thankfulness and begin embodying it, where we stop trying to impress with language and instead impress with our presence. There is something deeply healing about being received in silence, about not needing to explain why you're worthy of being cared for, about not needing to say thank you in a way that performs politeness but fails to touch depth. In this kind of silence, there is no hierarchy, no transaction, no ego, just two humans connected by a single, brief moment of shared existence. Monks train for years to be comfortable in this silence, to not fidget when nothing is said, to not fill the air with needless mantras or spiritual filler, because in this sacred gap between words, something much greater speaks. The Dharma itself, the truth of impermanence, the teaching that all things rise and pass without the need for explanation, that what is truly meaningful is often what is left unspoken. You may not walk through the streets barefoot with a bowl, but you can practice this silence in your own life. When someone helps you, pause. Let your eyes meet. Let the moment land. When a friend is in pain, don't rush to fix it. Just sit there, without advice, without rescue. Just be. That's the bowl. That's the silence. That's the offering. Silence teaches restraint. It trains us to notice when our words are just noise, just filler, just another layer of avoidance or performance. When you practice silence, you begin to see that many things you thought were necessary to say weren't. That most apologies are more sincere with a look than with a script. That most love is felt more in presence than in poetry. In many monasteries, monks observe a practice called noble silence. During meals, during walking, sometimes even during entire retreats, not as punishment, but as purification. When the mouth closes, the mind follows. When the tongue stops shaping thoughts, the heart starts hearing truth. You begin to notice the sound of your own chewing, the way your feet hit the earth, the breath as it travels through the body. You realize that the world is louder than it needs to be, and that peace isn't somewhere else. It's just beneath all the talking. The silence between bowls is a lesson in boundaries too. It teaches that not every moment is meant to be shared with sound, that some experiences are too sacred to be spoken, that some connections are stronger when they are not analyzed. When you learn to leave space, you also learn to respect the mystery of others. You stop interrogating every feeling. You stop demanding definitions for everything you feel. You learn to sit with what is, not because you understand it, but because you trust it. And this trust, born in silence, becomes a form of prayer, not to a god or a doctrine, but to presence itself, to this moment as it is, to the truth that no matter how much you explain your pain, it won't leave faster. But if you sit with it, hold it in stillness, it may soften, like a knot slowly unwinding, not because you pulled harder, but because you finally stopped pulling at all. That's what the silence between bowls teaches, that not all nourishment is physical, that not all healing needs fixing, that some of the most powerful moments in life are the ones where nothing is said, but everything is felt, where gratitude lives not in thank you cards, but in the quiet act of being fully present for another human being. As you lie here now, this same silence is all around you, between every breath, beneath every heartbeat, in the space where thoughts slow down and words lose their grip. Let yourself enter that space. Let it wash over you. Let it hold you like the space between bowls. Open, sacred, free of performance. There is no need to repeat mantras, no need to analyze the day. Just breathe. Just receive. Let this silence teach you what no sentence ever could, that you are not here to explain your worth. You are here to rest in it. And so the silence continues, a gift that costs nothing but gives everything, a teacher that never speaks but always tells the truth, a space that holds both the giver and the receiver, without needing to say who is who. Let this moment be your bowl. Let this breath be your offering. Let this silence be enough. And once the words are no longer needed, once silence has done what no language ever could, something deeper begins to arrive. Rest. Not the kind that knocks you out, not the kind that leaves you unconscious, but a kind that feels like being gently carried. A kind that doesn't fight sleep, but enters it with eyes half open and a soul fully aware, just like the Buddha once did. Few people know that the Buddha spoke of sleep, not as escape, not as failure of energy, but as something sacred. A place where awareness doesn't end, it softens. In a few rare but powerful mentions, the Buddha is described not only sitting beneath trees or walking mindfully through forests, but lying down with complete presence. Resting not out of fatigue, but from the fullness of being. His posture was called the lion's pose, not to display strength, but to remind us that sleep, when entered correctly, is not weakness, it's wisdom. Most people fall asleep to escape. From worry, from guilt, from the pressure of the day. And in doing so, sleep becomes another form of running. But Buddhist teachings offer something radically different. They speak of sleep not as a break from life, but as a continuation of mindfulness, as a moment to surrender without forgetting who we are. When the body lays down and the mind stays soft but aware, sleep becomes an extension of practice, not the end of it. There's a powerful phrase in ancient texts: the Buddha laid down mindfully. It wasn't just about how he rested his body, but how he placed his awareness like a gentle cloth over each moment, including the moment before rest. No clenching, no rushing, no fight to shut down the thoughts, just being present, even as consciousness fades. And that changes everything. In modern life, we often treat sleep as something to conquer. We say things like, "I'm trying to fall asleep," or "I need to get better sleep," as if sleep is something to force into submission. But the more we push it, the further it floats. That's because the body doesn't respond to force, it responds to safety. And awareness is safety. When we enter sleep, the way the Buddha did, mindfully, gently, with no agenda, we invite the body to let go without panic. We give the nervous system permission to stop scanning. We give the heart a reason to slow down. Mindful sleep isn't about staying awake all night watching your thoughts. It's about walking into rest like you're walking into a sacred room. Each step softer than the last. Each thought met with presence instead of reaction. So even if the thoughts come, even if the feelings swirl, your reaction changes. You stop trying to fix them. You just let them pass like clouds, knowing that sleep comes not when the mind is perfect, but when the struggle ends. The Buddha's lion posture is still used today in monastic traditions. The right side of the body rests on the ground, one hand under the cheek, the other resting along the leg. The eyes are often half closed. Why? Because the practice is still active. Even in sleep, there's a reminder to carry intention, not abandon it. Not because sleep is something to control, but because it's something to honor. This posture isn't mandatory. What matters more than form is feeling. What matters is the awareness we carry into our rest. Noticing the sensation of the bed, the sound of the air, the rhythm of breath as it slows. These aren't distractions. They are anchors. They bring us back from the edge of overthinking. They remind us the day is done. Nothing more is required of us now. No proving, no planning, just being. In Buddhist philosophy, rest is not seen as laziness. It is seen as a vital condition for wisdom. A tired mind cannot discern clearly. A restless body cannot sit still. That's why sleep, when entered with awareness, becomes as sacred as sitting in meditation. Both involve letting go. Both involve presence. The only difference is one is vertical and the other horizontal. There's a reason monks sleep early and wake before sunrise. Not because they fear rest, but because they respect its purpose. They understand that rest is not the absence of effort. It's what makes effort possible. Without it, practice becomes performance. Without it, kindness becomes exhaustion. Without it, the mind begins to consume itself. When you go to sleep with awareness, even your dreams begin to change. They soften, they stretch, they carry less panic, more insight. That's not magic. It's the nervous system responding to your new relationship with the night. And even if you wake up in the middle of the night, even if your sleep is broken, the practice still holds. You greet wakefulness without frustration. You return to rest without fear. This kind of rest is not common. It's not easy in a world that rewards busyness, but it is powerful. Because every time you fall asleep this way, you retrain your body to trust silence. You rewire your mind to let go without being pushed. You remind yourself that peace is not the reward after everything is done. It's the space you can enter even when everything is still messy. In the time of the Buddha, sleep was treated like ceremony. Simple beds, no excess, no obsession with comfort, just enough to support rest, not distract from it. That's the middle path, not luxury, not deprivation, just presence. When you apply this to your own life, even your room begins to change. You start removing things that disturb peace. You stop scrolling before sleep. You dim the lights, not just to help the eyes, but to help the heart remember. It's time to let go. There's something deeply beautiful about the idea that the Buddha, in all his wisdom, still lay down to sleep, still rested his head, still let his eyes close. It tells us that enlightenment doesn't mean becoming superhuman. It means becoming fully human, fully alive, fully in rhythm with what the body and soul truly need. And what we need, more than stimulation, more than answers, more than distractions, is to remember how to rest without guilt, to lie down without shame, to sleep without having solved everything, to surrender not because we've given up, but because we finally understand there is nothing to fight. The forgotten sutra of restful awareness isn't found in long chants or sacred scripts. It's found in the breath just before sleep, in the silence between thoughts, in the pause between waking and dreaming. That's where presence lives. That's where healing begins. That's where the teachings of the Buddha continue, not just in temples, not just in texts, but in the softness of the night. So tonight, let sleep be sacred. Let your body fall into the bed like it's returning to the earth. Let your breath carry you, not into unconsciousness, but into presence without effort. And if thoughts come, let them pass like visitors, not invaders. If emotions rise, meet them with the same compassion you would offer a tired friend. You don't need to do anything else. You've already arrived. This is what it means to sleep with the Buddha, not to be perfect, not to be silent, but to rest without resistance, to trust the night, to return to what has always been waiting, awareness that watches over you even when the eyes are closed. Let the body sink now. Let the breath take over. You are not leaving mindfulness behind. You are taking it with you into the quiet temple of sleep. And now that the body has begun to rest without resistance, now that the breath carries presence instead of pressure, there is one more layer to release, the stories that still follow us into sleep, the words we didn't say, the choices we still question, the mistakes that replay like echoes. Because even with the lights off, some memories still burn, some guilt still lingers in the quiet, and no amount of tiredness can quiet a heart that hasn't forgiven itself. This is where the practice of forgiveness begins, not as an idea, but as a way of resting, not as a way to erase the past, but as a way to stop carrying it every night. Buddhism doesn't ask us to forget. It doesn't tell us to pretend things didn't hurt or that we didn't cause harm. What it offers is softer. It offers the ability to see clearly without punishing ourselves forever. To recognize suffering and then release the grip we've had on it, not because it wasn't real, but because we are finally ready to stop being its prisoner. This is what Buddhists call the pillow of no regret. It's not a magical object. It's a state of mind, a way of lying down at night and not flinching at your own thoughts, a way of letting your head meet the pillow without the sudden pull of shame or sorrow. To rest, not because your past was perfect, but because you've stopped trying to rewrite it with regret. Regret is often mistaken for responsibility. We think that holding on to it means we care, that if we let go, we're letting ourselves off too easy. But the truth is, carrying regret doesn't make you wiser. It makes you harder, more guarded, less open to growth. Forgiveness in Buddhism is not permission, it's freedom. It's a softening of the inner terrain so the soul can walk barefoot again, so that when you lay down, you're not bracing for another battle in your own mind, You're surrendering to peace, not because everything was right, but because you're done fighting it. One of the most powerful teachings in the Pali Canon comes when the Buddha explains that suffering can be ended not by changing the world, but by changing our relationship to it. This includes the past. This includes all the people we were before we knew better. Forgiveness is not a reward for perfect behavior. It is a response to the truth that pain happens, and sometimes we are the cause. But holding on to self-hatred does not undo the pain. It adds more to it. So how do you lay on the pillow of no regret? You begin with honesty. You stop pretending you weren't hurt. You stop denying that you hurt others. You let it all rise, not to punish yourself, but to make room for healing. You stop running from your past and turn toward it like a friend who's been waiting for closure. You sit with it. You breathe with it. You say, yes, this happened, and I see it now. Then you do something radical. You stop rewriting the story in your mind. You stop rehearsing what you should have done. You stop building alternate endings. You accept that what happened, happened, and that your power now lies not in changing it, but in choosing who you become because of it. This is not forgetting. This is not erasing. This is making peace with the page you're on. In Buddhist practice, there is something called metta bhavana, the cultivation of loving kindness, and often the hardest person to offer it to is yourself, especially the version of yourself that made the biggest mistakes. But this practice teaches you to include that version, to send kindness to the person you were when you didn't know better, to wish yourself well, not because you were flawless, but because even brokenness deserves gentleness. When you lay on the pillow of no regret, you stop measuring your worth by your worst moments. You stop needing others to forgive you before you rest. You stop waiting for the past to change. You rest in the truth that growth has already begun, that you are not who you were, that you are learning, and that is enough. Forgiveness is not weakness. It takes more courage to forgive than to hold a grudge, because forgiveness asks you to let go of identity, the identity of being wronged, the identity of being broken, the identity of being the villain in your own life story. And that kind of letting go, it's a release so deep, it feels like grieving. But once the grief passes, all that remains is space. Space for peace, space for sleep. Monks who teach about forgiveness often compare it to unclenching the hand. When we carry regret, it's like gripping thorns, and we say, "Look how much I care, I'm still holding on." But pain is not proof of compassion. Compassion is when you finally open your palm and let it all fall. You stop needing to prove your sorrow. You start choosing freedom instead. This doesn't mean you never feel pain again. Some memories will always sting, but they don't have to define your night. They don't have to be the last thing you feel before sleep. You can greet them like old visitors, acknowledge them, thank them for what they've taught you, and then let them leave without following them out the door. That's what softens the soul. That's what makes the bed feel safe again. The practice of kshama, the Sanskrit word for forgiveness, is deeply tied to patience. Because forgiveness doesn't always happen in one night. Sometimes it comes in pieces, in layers. But even the willingness to begin the process starts to open something inside. Even saying, "I don't know how to forgive this yet, but I want to," is enough to begin softening the edges. What keeps us stuck in regret is the belief that we must punish ourselves into becoming better people. But Buddhism teaches something kinder. That self-compassion is the soil where transformation happens. That what you water grows, and if you keep watering guilt, it will grow thorns. But if you water gentleness, patience and clarity, they will grow roots that can carry you forward. So when you lie down tonight, don't ask your mind to be empty. Don't beg for silence. Instead, ask yourself, can I stop fighting this moment? Can I let myself feel what I feel without adding blame on top? Can I release the grip just enough to sleep, even if the past still stings a little? The pillow of no regret doesn't come from a perfect day. It comes from a decision to meet yourself as you are, to accept that you are still becoming, to let your breath cradle the version of you that is tired of being judged. That is the moment the body softens. That is the moment the nervous system says, it's safe now. That's when rest becomes real. And the truth is, you are allowed to rest before you figured everything out. You're allowed to sleep while the journey is still messy. You don't need to earn stillness. You only need to stop resisting it. That's what forgiveness creates. Not answers, but room. Not certainty, but spaciousness. Tonight, let the pillow be more than fabric. Let it be the ground you lay your regrets down on. Let it hold the weight so your heart doesn't have to. Let it carry what you can't carry anymore. And if the thoughts come, don't chase them. Don't argue. Let them pass like waves. You are no longer the storm. You are the shore it reaches, but does not move. This is what it means to rest on a life you no longer resist. Not because it's been perfect, but because you've chosen peace over punishment, because you've chosen softness over shame, because you are done letting your past interrupt your sleep. You are not here to be flawless. You are here to be free. And every breath you take in this stillness, every moment you don't recoil from yourself, is a step closer to that freedom. So let the day fall away. Let the judgment dissolve. Let the stories rest. The forgiveness has already begun. And you, at this moment, are exactly where you need to be. And once regret has been set down, once the heart has softened into stillness, there's one final knot that keeps the soul from resting fully: the need to hold on. The need to grip thoughts that no longer serve. People who never truly stayed. Dreams that never became reality. These attachments are quieter than guilt, but just as heavy. They sneak into the night, pretending to offer comfort, while quietly keeping the mind spinning. And the only way to truly fall into peace is to let go of what was never ours to carry. There is a Zen story that tells of a monk and the moon. One night, a thief came to rob the monk's hut. But the hut was empty. There was nothing to steal. The monk welcomed the thief anyway and said, "You've come a long way to visit me. You shouldn't leave empty-handed." So he removed his worn robe and handed it to the thief. As the thief fled, the monk looked up at the sky and whispered, "If only I could have given him the moon." This story is not about charity. It's not even about the thief. It's about how often we try to hold on to things we never truly owned. Control, outcomes, people, perceptions, even peace. We reach for these things the way the thief reached for valuables, and we end up disappointed. Because no matter how tightly we hold, life keeps proving that some things were never ours to keep. In Buddhist teachings, clinging is one of the roots of suffering, not because wanting is evil, but because it creates tension. The tighter we grip, the more we suffer when life shifts, when things break, when people leave, or when reality doesn't match our hopes. Letting go doesn't mean we stop caring. It means we stop needing, and there's a big difference. There is a kind of freedom that can only be felt when the hand unclenches, when the heart stops demanding a certain result, when the mind stops insisting that things should have been different. That freedom doesn't come from getting everything right. It comes from releasing everything wrong, not out of defeat, but out of deep understanding that we are not here to own life. We are here to experience it. Trying to sleep while clinging is like trying to rest with your fists clenched. The body might be still, but the soul is in battle. And you can feel it, the tension in your jaw, the weight on your chest, the tightness in your breath. That's not sleep, that's resistance. And the only way out is surrender. Not the dramatic kind, not the collapse, but the gentle release of what was never really yours. Letting go begins with recognition. You start to notice what you're still gripping. Maybe it's someone's approval. Maybe it's an identity that no longer fits. Maybe it's a memory that you keep replaying, hoping for a different ending. Whatever it is, you see it clearly. And then you ask the deeper question, is this mine to carry? Most of the time, it isn't. Most of the time, what we're gripping is not the thing itself. It's our idea of what it should have been. Our fantasy of control, our illusion of safety. We cling because we think it will protect us, but in reality, it just keeps us stuck. The monk in the story didn't just let go of his robe. He let go of the need to defend what didn't matter. He gave up control to remain free. In Buddhist psychology, this is the practice of non-attachment, and it's not coldness, it's not indifference. It's the deepest form of care. Because when you stop needing people or things to complete you, you start relating to them with openness instead of fear. You stop holding and start witnessing. You stop demanding and start appreciating. Letting go before sleep is an act of kindness. It's how you create space in the mind, so dreams don't become extensions of your stress. It's how you empty the cup so the night can refill you. Not with noise, but with peace. Not with fantasies, but with rest. Sometimes, what we're holding on to is not even ours. It's someone else's expectations, someone else's emotions, someone else's mess that we took on as our responsibility. But Buddhism teaches that we are only responsible for what is within our own path. We can show up, we can love, we can give, but we cannot fix, we cannot control, we cannot force. The moon the monk spoke of, that unreachable gift, is a symbol of everything we cannot grasp. Peace, clarity, presence. They cannot be given by force. They cannot be stolen. They must be received without possession. And that begins with a posture of release. Release isn't loud, it's not dramatic. It often looks like doing nothing, not texting back, not replaying the argument, not rewriting the future in your mind, just breathing, just being, just letting what is be. And that is more powerful than any control we could ever force. The more you practice this letting go, the more you begin to see how often you used to grip things without even noticing. You see how many times you tensed up in conversations, How many times you braced for disappointment? How many times you tried to plan 5 steps ahead to avoid discomfort? But the truth is, comfort doesn't come from control. It comes from clarity. And clarity comes when the noise ends. This is why monks live simply, not because they hate comfort, but because they understand the cost of clutter, mental, emotional, physical. They know that every possession comes with a weight, every attachment comes with a risk, and the lightest life is one lived open-handed. When you stop grasping, you don't lose everything. You gain spaciousness. You gain energy that was once used to protect illusions. You gain moments, real, quiet moments, that were once missed because your mind was too busy holding on. And in that space, sleep becomes easier, softer, deeper, because your mind is no longer building walls, it's building peace. This isn't a one-time event, it's a nightly practice. Each evening, you check in. What am I holding that I no longer need? What thought has stayed too long? What storyline is draining me? And one by one, you let them go. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with compassion, because every attachment was once trying to protect you, and now you are strong enough to let it go. Letting go isn't about having no desire, it's about having clean desire. Desire that doesn't poison you, that doesn't chain you, that doesn't trick you into believing your wholeness is elsewhere. The monk who released the moon wasn't empty, he was full of clarity, because he had nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to grasp. So tonight, as you feel the weight of your body settle into stillness, notice what your heart is still carrying, and gently, tenderly, begin to release it. Not because you're supposed to, but because you deserve to. You deserve to rest without clinging, to sleep without armor, to breathe without bargaining. Let your thoughts rise and fall like waves. Let your breath be the only thing you follow. Let your peace come not from solving everything, but from holding nothing too tightly. The moon is still here. It was never meant to be owned, just seen, just witnessed, just appreciated. And so are you, unheld by others, unburdened by yesterday, untied from illusion, just here, just resting, just enough. And once the hands finally release what was never meant to be held, once the moon is left untouched in the sky and the body no longer fights for control, something softer begins to rise, the quiet task of tending to what remains. Even after letting go, there's residue, dust, the fine particles of thought and memory that settle on the inner floors of the mind. They don't scream, they don't demand, but they dull the shine of presence, and so the practice continues, not with striving, but with care, not to fix, but to clear space, to gently sweep the temple of the self before rest. In many monasteries, early morning begins not with chanting, not with teaching, but with sweeping. Long before sunlight fills the halls, monks rise and pick up simple brooms. They move through the temple slowly, sweeping corners that barely hold dirt. And it's not because the temple is dirty, it's because the act itself is sacred, because cleaning the space is a form of meditation, because the dust that settles outside is a mirror for the dust that settles inside, and both need tending. This practice is not about perfection. The dust will return tomorrow. The floor will never stay spotless. But the sweeping is not about a final result. It's about presence, the way the body moves, the way the broom glides, the way attention returns again and again to what is right in front of you. That's the point. Not to conquer dust, but to meet it without frustration, without judgment, with loving awareness. Your thoughts are like that dust. Throughout the day, they collect. Some are light and pass easily. Others settle deeper. Thoughts about what went wrong. Thoughts about who you should be. Thoughts about what still needs fixing. And at night, when the noise around you fades, the weight of those thoughts starts to feel heavier. Not because they're new, but because now you can finally hear them. This is why sweeping the temple mind matters. It's not about stopping thoughts. It's about recognizing what's there, moving gently through your inner space, noticing the corners that have been ignored, the places that feel tight, the patterns that repeat not because you want them to, but because they've never been seen with kindness. You don't need a broom for this. You need presence. You need the willingness to look, not with judgment, but with softness. To say, I see this fear. I see this expectation. I see this tension. And instead of pushing it away, you sweep around it. You make space. You let it be touched by attention. Because often, what we call clutter is just something we haven't faced with care. The reason monks return to sweeping every day is because they understand the nature of the mind. It doesn't stay clear by accident. It becomes clear through devotion, through repetition, through simple acts done with full heart. You don't need dramatic rituals to find peace. Sometimes, the act of sitting with your thoughts, breathing slowly, and letting them rise and fall without interference is enough to restore balance. Sweeping the mind also means noticing what you're holding on to out of habit, the stories that play on loop, the imagined conversations, the quiet criticisms. These are the dust particles that build up until you can't see yourself clearly anymore. And the way to clean them is not by force, but by steady awareness, by asking, does this need to stay? And if not, letting it go without drama. There's no punishment in this practice. If the same thought returns tomorrow, you don't call it failure. You simply sweep again. You return. You clear. Not because you expect permanent silence, but because each sweep teaches you something. Each moment of presence makes the mind more spacious. Each breath gives the heart more room. This isn't about emptying the mind completely. That's not the goal. The mind will always think. That's its nature. The practice is to relate to those thoughts differently, to not let them pile up unnoticed, to not let them run wild, to sweep them into awareness gently, so they don't own you, so they don't cloud you. So when you lay down to sleep, you aren't sleeping in a temple filled with debris. There's beauty in the simplicity of this. You don't need to figure everything out before rest. You don't need to be thought-free. You just need to notice, to clear space for stillness to enter, to treat the mind like something worth caring for, not managing like a problem, but tending like a sacred place. Monks don't rush their sweeping. They don't try to do it all at once. They move slowly, mindfully. This rhythm teaches something important. Peace doesn't come from speed. It comes from attention, from presence, from taking the time to notice what you usually step over. At night, when you lie down, this same principle applies. You don't need to clear every worry before sleep. You don't need to organize every thought. You only need to sit quietly Breathe and start sweeping. With each breath, you gather a little dust. With each exhale, you release it. No urgency, no pressure, just presence. Some thoughts will cling. That's okay. Some parts of the floor are stickier than others. What matters is that you meet those parts with patience, that you don't shame yourself for the mess, that you trust the process. Because every night you return to this practice, the dust settles less. The mind becomes more clear, more open, and sleep becomes not just a physical break, but a spiritual restoration. This practice also changes how you wake. When the temple of the mind has been tended to, you don't wake up in reaction. You wake up with clarity, with space, with less noise, and that changes how you live, not just how you sleep. So tonight, before the body falls into deep rest, begin your sweeping. Not to fix yourself, not to erase the day, but to make space, to meet yourself. To remember that peace doesn't come from pushing thoughts away, but from being kind to them, from letting them pass like leaves on a breeze, noticed but not clung to. You are not here to be spotless. You are here to be spacious, to be soft, to be open to stillness. And this stillness comes not by chance, but by returning to yourself, one sweep at a time. Let the breath continue now. Let the dust lift. Let the floor of your mind clear enough to welcome silence. And let that silence cradle you. You've tended to the temple tonight. You've shown up with care. Now, rest in the space you've made. The sweeping is done. The peace is here. Let it hold you. And now that the inner floor has been swept, now that there's space between your thoughts and breath, you may begin to notice what still lingers, what wasn't cleared with silence alone. The heaviness that doesn't leave just because you asked it to. The quiet weight of sorrow that clings not to the surface of the mind, but deep in the center of the chest. Some pain doesn't dissolve. Some emotions don't exit gently. But that doesn't mean they have to drown you. There is a way to carry pain without sinking beneath it. And it begins with a lesson passed down from the earliest Buddhist texts, a lesson about a boat. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha once told a story about a man who builds a raft to cross a river. The raft saves his life. It carries him from danger to safety. But when he reaches the other shore, he begins to wonder if he should continue carrying the raft on his back. The Buddha says, no. Once the raft has done its job, you don't cling to it. You set it down with gratitude and continue walking. But if the river hasn't ended, if the journey still calls for crossing, then you use the raft wisely, not as a burden, but as a support. Pain is like that. It's not meant to be denied, but it's not meant to be clung to either. It can be carried, but it must be carried wisely. Not by tying it around your neck, not by pretending it's not there, but by learning how to stay afloat even when the waters rise. Because sorrow may visit the soul, but it doesn't have to flood it. Most people respond to emotional pain in extremes. They either avoid it completely, pretending they're fine while it drags beneath the surface, or they drown in it, letting the sorrow become their identity. But Buddhism teaches a middle way, the way of the raft. You don't throw pain into the river and pretend it's gone, and you don't let it pull you under. You build something strong enough to hold it. A boat of mindfulness, a vessel of acceptance, a practice that lets pain rest beside you but never drive. Carrying pain begins with the courage to face it. You can't build a boat if you're still denying the flood. You have to look directly at what hurts, not with blame, not with urgency, but with presence. That's what keeps you afloat. Not the absence of sorrow, but the clarity to name it, to sit beside it, to stop running from it. This doesn't mean you analyze your pain endlessly. It means you make space for it. You stop stuffing it down or trying to solve it like a puzzle. Pain is not a problem to fix. It's a truth to hold. When you treat it like something to be eliminated, you only create more struggle. But when you say, "This is here," and let it breathe, you begin to build the boat. And this boat is not made of denial. It's made of simple presence, of showing up each day and meeting what arises without flinching, without escaping into stories, without needing to know when the pain will end. You begin to realize that your strength is not in eliminating discomfort. It's in staying conscious through it. The Buddha never promised a life without suffering. What he taught was the possibility of liberation through awareness. That even in the deepest sorrow, there can be space, there can be breath, there can be room for something else to exist alongside the grief, a quiet, enduring steadiness that watches but does not collapse. When sorrow becomes overwhelming, it often means we've mistaken it for our whole identity. We forget that there's more to us than the ache. But when you sit in meditation, when you practice breathing with the pain instead of against it, you start to remember the part of you that can hold discomfort without being shattered by it. This is what it means to float. You still feel the pain. You still carry the memory. But it doesn't weigh you down in the same way. Because now there's a boat. Now there's structure. Now there's space between what hurts and the part of you that can witness it. And this boat doesn't require you to be unbreakable. It only asks that you stay, that you don't abandon yourself, that you don't jump overboard the moment sadness rises. It invites you to stay seated, stay breathing, stay open, not to fix, but to float. Sometimes the waves will be strong, the storm will feel personal, but your breath becomes the oar. Your practice becomes the frame. The teachings become the ropes that keep it together. And every time you return to your cushion, or to your breath in bed, or to a moment of stillness in the middle of emotion, you reinforce that raft. Wise containment doesn't mean ignoring pain. It means giving it boundaries, letting it exist without consuming everything else. This is why monks spend so much time in silence, not to escape, but to listen deeply to what arises, and to train the heart to respond, not react. When you carry pain wisely, you start to notice that it changes shape. Not because it disappears, but because it's no longer compressed, no longer hidden. And like anything exposed to air, to breath, it begins to soften, it begins to move, it begins to integrate. Sometimes pain teaches, sometimes it just stays for a while. But either way, your job is not to force it to leave. Your job is to hold the space without sinking, to remind yourself gently that you are still afloat, that you are not the storm, that you are the one witnessing it all, alive, breathing, resilient. Letting pain exist without letting it rule you, that's real strength. That's the kind of power that grows over time, quietly. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that every human heart has the capacity to hold sorrow without breaking. That the soul, when it stops resisting, becomes as vast as the ocean. This isn't about being passive. It's about knowing when to act and when to sit still, when to speak and when to listen, when to comfort yourself and when to simply breathe until the wave passes. This discernment, born from mindfulness, is the rudder of the boat. It doesn't make the pain less real, but it helps you steer through it with grace. So, tonight, if the pain is still present, if it's still curling around your thoughts, let it stay. But do not let it take the wheel. Acknowledge it, hold it, and then return to your breath. Let that breath remind you, I am not drowning. I am still here. I am not lost. I am learning to carry what hurts without letting it crush me. This is how you become unsinkable, not because you're numb, but because you're deeply awake, fully alive, steady in the storm. You don't need to be free of pain to rest. You only need to be willing to stay with yourself as you are. That willingness, that presence, that's your boat. That's what keeps you afloat. And tonight, you're already in it, floating, breathing, stronger than the sorrow, holding what is hard without letting it define who you are. And even now, as the boat continues to carry the weight of sorrow without tipping, something more subtle begins to stir. Thoughts. Endless, swirling, layered thoughts that don't scream, but whisper just loud enough to keep you from sinking into peace. Not heavy enough to drown you like pain, not sharp enough to wound you like regret, but persistent in their own way. This is the next layer, not the storm, but the weather. The inner climate of the mind that changes moment to moment. And the only way to find stillness inside it is to stop taking the weather personally. Tibetan Buddhist teachings offer a simple but powerful image. The mind is like the sky, and thoughts are just clouds passing through. Some are light and wispy, some are dark and heavy. But none of them change the nature of the sky. The sky remains untouched, spacious, pure, no matter what moves across it. And this is what most people forget. They think every thought means something. They react to each cloud as if it defines the sky. But it doesn't. A passing cloud is just that, passing. The mind produces thoughts the way the body produces breath. Constantly, automatically, without needing permission. You don't choose your thoughts any more than you choose the shape of the clouds above your head. But you can choose how to relate to them. That's where freedom lives, not in trying to stop thinking, but in learning how not to cling to every thought that appears. When you begin to see thoughts like clouds, your relationship with your mind changes. You stop needing to chase every idea. You stop fearing every negative emotion. You stop believing that the presence of a thought means it's true. A thought is just an appearance. It arises, it floats, it dissolves. That's it. And when you stop judging the clouds, you stop creating storms. The suffering doesn't come from the thought itself. It comes from believing the thought, from attaching meaning to every mental movement, from analyzing, reacting, arguing, agreeing, resisting. That's what turns a passing cloud into a thunderstorm. But when you watch the thought without judgment, without pushing or pulling, it loses its power. It becomes a shape, a sound, a flicker, and then it's gone. This is what Tibetan teachers call sky-like awareness. A vast, open, unshakable presence that watches but does not interfere. It's not passive, it's deeply awake. But it doesn't take anything personally. That's what makes it peaceful. That's what makes it strong. When you cultivate this awareness, you become the sky, not the weather. Thoughts will still come. Of course they will. Thoughts about the past, about the future, about what you did wrong, about what could go wrong. But the moment you recognize them as clouds, you create space. And in that space, there's breathing room, there's silence, there's clarity. Judgment is what tightens the mind. It's what creates shame, fear, guilt, confusion. Not the thought itself, but the story you attach to it. I shouldn't be thinking this. Why am I like this? What does this mean about me? These questions are the chains. But when a thought appears and you simply say, "There you are," it has nowhere to attach. It floats, it moves, it fades. Sky-like awareness also means not needing every cloud to be beautiful, not needing every thought to be kind or useful or perfect. Some clouds are heavy, some thoughts are unpleasant. That doesn't mean they are wrong. That doesn't mean they are a failure. They are just weather. You are not the weather. At night, this matters more than ever, because as the body softens and the external world quiets, the internal weather becomes louder. And if you don't know how to watch without judgment, your own thoughts can trap you. They can spiral. They can convince you that you're broken. But you're not broken. You're just experiencing clouds, and clouds pass. When you practice watching your thoughts instead of reacting to them, you build inner strength. You become less reactive, less easily disturbed, more present. You learn to sit with discomfort without needing to change it. And that stillness, unmoved, undisturbed, that's what begins to heal the nervous system. That's what allows sleep to come, not just as rest, but as renewal. The key is consistency. Sky-like awareness doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments. You notice a thought. You let it pass. You return to your breath. You forget. You judge again. And then you remember and return again. Every return is a clearing. Every time you let a thought pass without following it, you reinforce your freedom. And this doesn't mean you lose all thoughts. Some thoughts have wisdom, some bring clarity, but even then, you let them pass. You trust that the right thoughts will return. You don't need to grab them, because grasping is fear, and letting go is faith. What's important is how you relate to the thought, not whether the thought is positive or negative. You might have a kind thought, but if you cling to it, it becomes another weight. You might have a harsh thought, but if you let it pass, it can't hurt you. That's why neutrality is powerful. Not coldness, not distance, but the willingness to watch without getting caught. At first, this can feel unnatural, especially if you've spent years believing your thoughts define you. But with practice, it becomes ease. It becomes normal to say, "That's just a thought," and move on. It becomes natural to return to breath, to the body, to the space beneath the thinking. That space becomes home. And in that home, you find rest. True rest. Not the kind that comes from distraction, but the kind that comes from non-attachment. The kind that lets you lie down without needing to solve everything, without needing to correct your mind, without needing to be perfect. You lie there, breathing slowly, and let the thoughts rise like mist. Some are memories, some are worries, some are random. You don't push, you don't cling, you simply watch. And over time, the sky becomes clearer, not because you forced it, but because you stopped stirring the clouds. You are not your thoughts. You are the space they pass through. And that space cannot be broken. It cannot be stained. It cannot be destroyed. No matter how many thoughts appear, the sky remains. So tonight, let the thoughts come. Let them dance. Let them swirl. But do not follow. Do not chase. Let your breath anchor you. Let your awareness spread like open sky. And let every cloud pass, knowing it has no power unless you give it weight. This is the mind at rest. This is the beginning of deep peace, not because everything is quiet, but because you have learned how to remain clear even when the clouds appear. Let the sky hold you now. Let the thoughts move. Let the judgment end. Nothing needs to be different. Everything is passing. And you, vast, open, silent, are still here. And once the sky is remembered as home and the clouds are no longer feared or followed, the air begins to feel different, lighter, less charged, more open. But within that openness, there is still a longing, not for silence, not for stillness, but for warmth. A kind of comfort that speaks not through thought, not even through touch, but through something older, something instinctive, what enters through the breath but reaches far deeper. This is where the next practice begins, not in the mind, but in the atmosphere that surrounds it, not in a word, but in a fragrance. In many Buddhist traditions, scent is not a decoration. It is a form of prayer, a way of cleansing not just physical space, but energetic presence. When monks light incense, they are not simply making the air smell pleasant. They are invoking memory. They are calling the body into softness, guiding the spirit into reverence. And they are doing something even more subtle, soothing the imprints that suffering has left behind. These imprints, called samskaras, are traces left on the mind and body from past experience. They don't always show up as memory. Sometimes they show up as mood, as tension, as an unexplainable heaviness. They live in the nervous system, and they carry the residue of thoughts, actions, and emotions that were never fully digested. And while meditation clears many of these layers, there are some imprints that respond not to silence, but to scent. Sandalwood is one of the most revered of these sacred scents, not just for its earthy sweetness, but for its deep connection to presence. In temples across Tibet, India, Thailand, and Sri Lanka, sandalwood is used during chanting, during death rituals, during prayer, and during rest. It is said to purify without aggression, to center without overwhelming, to soften the mind without forcing it to let go. Sandalwood doesn't push, it invites. The Buddhist understanding of aroma is that scent bypasses the thinking mind. It does not ask for logic. It does not need a reason. It goes directly to the heart of sensation, to the body's memory. And when that memory is met with safety, something begins to open. A wall comes down. A breath deepens. A knot begins to loosen, not because someone said the right thing, but because the air itself began to speak in a different way. The sandalwood room is not always a literal place. It is a space we create through intention. a space where every inhale is part of the ritual, where the air becomes an offering, where presence is infused not just into what is done, but into what is felt through the most subtle of senses. In the old monasteries, there were rooms where nothing happened except rest. But before monks entered those spaces, they lit incense, not to mask smell, but to signal to the body, this is sacred now. This is not where you plan or perform. This is where you let go. The scent became a boundary between doing and being, a signal to the nervous system that struggle was no longer needed. This is one of the quiet powers of aroma. It communicates safety faster than words. It reminds the body of calm it once knew, even if the mind forgot. And because so much of restlessness is rooted in unprocessed experience, scent becomes a backdoor to healing. It reaches places meditation can't always touch directly, not because it's stronger, but because it speaks a different language. In Buddhist ceremony, scent is offered to the Buddha not as a demand, but as a sign of devotion. The idea is not to please a god, but to purify the heart, to remind the practitioner that beauty itself can be a path, that when something smells good, and that goodness is held with presence, it becomes medicine. It becomes mindfulness. It becomes the bridge between outer atmosphere and inner stillness. There is a reason why trauma survivors often respond strongly to scent. Because memory lives in the body, and the body is deeply shaped by what it breathes in. When we create a space infused with sacred aroma, we are doing more than calming the surface. We are tending to the deepest impressions, the ones that linger long after the moment has passed. Sandalwood, in particular, is said to cool the fire of the mind, to ease the agitation of thought without suppressing it, to allow emotion to be felt without being inflamed. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't force silence. It creates the conditions for spaciousness. And in spaciousness, healing begins, not with effort, but with presence. The practice of using aroma as medicine is ancient. Ayurvedic texts describe scent as a form of sattva, the quality of balance and clarity, not stimulating, not dulling, but centering. And that's what we need most before sleep. Not sedation, not suppression, but softness that doesn't ask us to disappear. Creating your own sandalwood room doesn't require a temple. It requires awareness, a candle lit with intention, a few drops of oil placed near where you rest. Even the simple act of inhaling and exhaling while holding the scent in your awareness becomes a form of meditation, a message to the body that now is the time to drop the armor, to loosen the grip, to breathe without defending anything. Because scent lives in the breath, it becomes part of the rhythm. And when that rhythm slows, so does the mind. This is why monks often breathe in through the nose while seated with incense, not to deepen the practice, but to deepen the presence. The scent becomes a companion, not a tool, not a trick, but a silent witness that holds the space without needing to say anything. Sometimes the body needs more than silence. Sometimes it needs softness that wraps around it. The warmth of scent does this without pressure. It does not pull. It simply exists, and in its existence, the body remembers that it is safe. This is especially important at night, when unresolved energy often returns. When thoughts that were pushed aside all day finally have room to surface. And while meditation helps us observe them, aroma helps us stay soft while we do. It creates a nest for the awareness to rest in, a kind of cushion for the soul, not one that blocks emotion, but one that holds it gently enough to let it move. You are not controlling the mind with scent. You are reminding the body that peace is possible. That stillness does not have to be empty. That rest can be rich, full, and safe. This kind of rest is not accidental. It is cultivated. It is invited. It is built breath by breath, ritual by ritual, presence by presence. Scent is not magic, but it is memory. It is emotional memory. It is cellular permission. And when used with care, it becomes one of the gentlest ways to soothe the nervous system and prepare the mind for sleep, not by force, but by beauty. Let this space you're in now become your sandalwood room. Whether there is fragrance or not, let the breath be scented with awareness. Let the air feel sacred, even if it's quiet. Let this moment be filled not with action, but with atmosphere. You don't need a perfect setup. You don't need expensive oils. You need presence. You need the willingness to surround yourself with gentleness. That's what calms the karmic impressions. Not denial, but devotion. Not escape, but care. This is how the soul begins to settle, not just through thoughts, but through sensation, through the parts of you that speak in whispers, through the layers that never learned how to soften with words alone. Let the scent carry you now. Let it speak without sound. Let the air feel kind again. The sandalwood room is not far away. You're already in it. And now that the space around you has been softened, now that the air carries presence and the breath no longer feels like survival but ceremony, there's something else you begin to notice. Sound. Not loud, not urgent, but constant. The creak of the floor, the sigh of the wind, a distant dog, the rhythm of your breath. These are not interruptions. They are invitations. In the stillness you've created, even the quietest sound becomes part of the practice. The next step on this path is not about silence, but about listening without needing to reply. In the solitude of forest monasteries, monks are taught to listen to everything, not to judge it, not to analyze it, but to receive it fully, whether it's birdsong, rainfall, rustling leaves, or even a cough from a neighboring hut. Every sound becomes a teacher, not because it holds meaning in the way the mind often searches for, but because it holds presence. Each sound becomes a bell, not calling for attention, but reminding that it's already here. In the Dhamma talks given deep in the Thai forests, some masters would tell their students not to tune out the world, but to listen to it more deeply, not to filter sound as distraction, but to meet it as practice. The chirp of a frog becomes no different than the rise of a thought. It appears, it passes, it reveals something, not through words, but through awareness. The problem is not sound, it's resistance to sound. It's the belief that peace only comes when the world is completely quiet. But in the Buddhist view, that kind of peace is fragile. Real peace is the ability to remain centered, even when life continues moving around you. That includes noise. That includes what you hear when you're trying to sleep, when you're meditating, or when your thoughts are already loud. When you let go of the need to judge every sound, you stop reacting. You stop deciding which sounds are good and which are bad. You stop labeling everything as peaceful or annoying. This is how sound stops being a trigger and becomes a teacher. You hear a car pass, and instead of tensing, you breathe. You hear the wind knock on your window, and instead of wishing it would stop, you let it stay. And in that shift, something deeper opens. This practice is known as receptive listening. You are not hunting for meaning. You are not bracing for disturbance. You are simply letting sound move through you, like wind moves through the trees, like water flows around stones. This is what forest monks mean when they say, listen with your whole body, not your ears alone, but your skin, your breath, your presence. And what you'll notice is that the body responds. When sound is not labeled as threat or task, the nervous system softens. You stop being on guard. You start being available to feel without defense, to hear without judgment, to rest without needing to shut out the world. In this kind of listening, even the ordinary becomes sacred. The fan humming beside you, the crackle of an old floorboard, the distant bark of a dog. None of these sounds have to be removed. They can be included, not as problems, but as part of the moment. This is especially powerful at night, when so many people feel they need complete silence to rest. But Buddhist teachings remind us, peace is not the absence of sound. Peace is presence in the middle of sound. It's the ability to hear and not be pulled, to feel vibration and not be moved off-center, to receive without needing to respond. When you start to listen this way, even your thoughts change tone. You hear them as sound, too, less personal, less sticky, just movements in the mind, like wind in the trees. No reply needed, no argument necessary. Forest monks often say, don't chase the echo, let it return on its own, meaning don't answer every thought, don't respond to every feeling, let it call, let it ring, let it fade. Because when you always try to answer, you're no longer listening, you're preparing. And when you're preparing, you miss what is. So the next time you hear a sound, especially one you didn't plan for, pause. Instead of bracing, open. Let it move through you like a wave. Let it come. Let it go. And you'll feel something rare, a moment of peace that isn't dependent on what the world does, a peace that remains no matter what enters the room. This isn't a trick, it's a practice, and it deepens the more you do it. You'll start to notice sound not just as background noise, but as rhythm, as movement, as life itself. And when you stop trying to shape the soundtrack of your life, you start hearing the beauty of its imperfection. This way of listening also changes how you relate to others. You stop needing to speak right away. You stop filling every pause with your own voice. You begin to hear what isn't said. You begin to feel the space beneath words. And that kind of listening, slow, deep, present, it heals. Not just relationships, but the inner noise that comes from always needing to be right, to be first, to be heard. You begin to trust that not every sound requires your reaction. Not every echo needs your voice. Not every tension demands your answer. And in that trust, your energy returns. Your presence deepens. You no longer feel pulled in every direction. You become the center again. Some nights, you'll hear your own heartbeat more clearly than the room. Some nights, the crickets outside will sing longer than your thoughts. Some nights, even the silence will feel loud. But every one of these experiences becomes part of the path when you stop resisting, when you stop editing the moment and begin receiving it fully. This is not silence as absence. This is silence as relationship. A space between things. A sacred pause where meaning does not need to be made, only met. So as you rest tonight, let the sounds come. Let the wind speak. Let the distant murmur rise and fall. Let your thoughts echo once or twice more and then go unanswered. You are not here to respond. You are here to listen. And in that listening, you are already home. This is what the forest monks knew, that peace is not earned through control. It is found through inclusion, through allowing what is here to be here, without fixing it, without naming it, just breathing through it. Let this breath be your listening. Let this room be your forest. Let each sound pass like a friend who needs nothing from you but your presence. You don't need to speak. You don't need to understand. You just need to hear. And let hearing be enough. And once sound is no longer something to respond to, once even the faintest echo is received without resistance, there's a new kind of silence that begins to rise. A stillness not just in the room, but in the mind. And in that stillness, a deeper urge often appears, the urge to reflect, to look inward, to evaluate, to hold up a mirror and search for meaning, flaws, progress, identity. But what if the mirror didn't need to reflect anything at all? What if true peace came not from seeing yourself more clearly, but from no longer needing to? There is an old Zen story of a novice monk who spent hours each day polishing a mirror. He believed that if he could keep the mirror spotless, he would see his true nature more clearly. He scrubbed away every speck, every streak, constantly wiping, inspecting, refining. One day, the abbot walked by and watched quietly. Then he said, "You can polish the mirror all day, but no matter how clear it gets, it will never show you freedom. Freedom begins when you stop looking for yourself in the mirror." This teaching isn't about literal glass. It's about the internal mirror, the one we hold up constantly, the part of us that watches, measures, evaluates. Am I getting better? Do I look peaceful enough? Have I grown? Why do I still feel this way? These questions may seem helpful, but often they are a disguise for clinging. A subtle way we stay trapped in self-concern. They keep us locked in identity, endlessly circling the idea of who we think we are. In Buddhist practice, there's a word for this: mana. It means the sense of I am this. Even in spiritual growth, mana creeps in. The identity of the one who is meditating, the one who is healing, the one who is trying to be better. And the more we polish that identity, the harder it becomes to let go. The empty mirror is a different approach. It's not about reflecting back a better image. It's about being spacious enough to hold everything without needing to define any of it. It allows experiences to arise and fade, thoughts to come and go, feelings to be felt fully without needing to make them about you. This is not detachment in the cold sense. It's intimacy without possession. It's the ability to feel something deeply, but not create a story around it. When a thought of sadness comes, you don't need to say, "Why am I still sad?" or "What does this mean about me?" You just feel it, hold it, and let it pass. That's the empty mirror. It reflects what arises, but does not cling to the reflection. In many Zen monasteries, students are told that even attachment to clarity is still attachment. You can become so obsessed with self-awareness that you forget how to simply be. You trade one form of clinging for another, and the mind remains tense, even while practicing calm. Letting the mirror go empty means stepping out of the loop of self-analysis. Not forever, not with denial, but with trust. Trust that growth is happening even when you're not tracking it, that you are evolving even when you're not documenting it, that life unfolds best when it isn't constantly under a microscope. One of the subtle traps in practice is the need to know. How am I doing? Am I improving? These seem innocent, but they often stem from a deeper restlessness, a belief that we are only okay if we're getting somewhere. But Buddhism teaches that true transformation happens when we stop measuring, when we stop turning every experience into data about the self. This doesn't mean we abandon reflection entirely. It means we learn when to put the mirror down, when to stop rehearsing the same questions, when to stop polishing what does not need to be polished. Some moments are meant to be lived, not understood. Some nights are meant to be felt, not analyzed. The novice monk believed that the clearer the mirror, the closer he'd get to enlightenment. But the abbot knew better. Enlightenment doesn't come from seeing a perfect reflection. It comes from no longer needing to look. It comes when there's no watcher, no image, no self to improve, just being, pure and wide open. You may have thoughts tonight about how your practice is going. You may wonder if you're doing it right, if you've let go enough, if your mind is quiet enough. These thoughts are the mirror, and the practice is not to argue with them, but to stop polishing, to stop fixing, to let the mirror go empty. Because the mind that doesn't cling reflects everything perfectly, not because it's still, but because it no longer identifies with the image. You are not the reflection. You are the space that holds it. This shift changes how you rest. Instead of lying down trying to feel peaceful, you just rest. Instead of searching for proof that you've let go, you simply let go. Instead of checking in every few minutes to see if your thoughts have stopped, you stop checking. And something deeper begins to settle, not because you forced it, but because you stopped interfering. This is where true stillness begins. Not in having no thoughts, but in no longer needing them to go away. Not in seeing yourself clearly, but in not needing to be seen. The more you drop the image of who you are supposed to be, the more freedom you feel in who you already are. The empty mirror doesn't reflect status. It doesn't compare. It doesn't create. It only receives. It watches the rising and falling of each moment without commentary. And that kind of awareness is where real peace lives, not in outcomes, but in openness. So tonight, let the thoughts come without analysis. Let the feelings rise without interpretation. Let the breath move without being turned into a project. Let everything appear as it is and pass as it must. The mirror doesn't need to hold it. You don't need to hold it. You are already whole without the reflection. The novice eventually put the mirror down, not because he gave up, but because he finally understood. There was never anything wrong with the mirror. There was just nothing left to polish. Let this be your mirror tonight, clear, quiet and empty. Let the image fade. Let the self rest. Let awareness hold what arises without trying to make it mean anything. This is enough. You are enough. Nothing more needs to be seen. And now that the mirror has been set down, now that the need to reflect has been released like breath at the end of a long exhale, what remains is not a clearer image, but space. Not a summary of the self, but a quiet openness that no longer chases understanding. And from within this openness comes the next lesson. Not a teaching of what to add, but a teaching of what to let go. Not more to carry, but less to hold. Not a full cup, but one that holds only space. The Heart Sutra, one of the most revered teachings in Mahayana Buddhism, speaks a line that echoes through centuries. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. On the surface, it sounds abstract. But within these words lies the very nature of peace. Peace, not as something achieved, but something allowed. Something that arrives not when we have everything, but when we are no longer burdened by needing anything. In daily life, fullness is often misunderstood. People equate fullness with accumulation, a full schedule, a full closet, a full plate, a full head. But the more we fill, the heavier we feel. The more we carry, the less we notice. And over time, fullness becomes confusion, cluttered emotion, crowded thoughts, saturated awareness. The Heart Sutra turns this idea inside out. It points to the cup, not when it's overflowing, but when it's empty, as the place where life begins to pour in. Not because emptiness is lack, but because emptiness is freedom from what does not serve. A clear space, a silent room, a mind that no longer hoards. This kind of emptiness is not about loss. It's about release. It's the shedding of what's been accumulated but never truly needed. Expectations, labels, emotional baggage passed down like inheritance, stories that were never yours, pain that never had to be permanent. All of it fills the cup, leaving no room for stillness. To feel full in the Buddhist sense is to let your emotional body be unburdened, not blank, not shut down, but available. Available to feel without being shaped by every feeling. Available to receive without grabbing. Available to rest without guilt. You don't find this kind of fullness by doing more. You find it by seeing clearly what's no longer needed and releasing it, one thought at a time. Not with anger, not with dramatic gestures, but like breath leaving the body, naturally, unforced. There's a teaching that says you can't pour tea into a cup that's already full. The same is true with presence. You cannot experience peace if the mind is stuffed with unresolved noise. You cannot enter rest if your soul is dragging too much behind it. You cannot feel whole when you are crowded with things you were never meant to carry. So the practice becomes subtraction, gently, patiently. You don't rip things away, you become aware. This resentment, do I need it? This belief, has it served me lately? This memory, am I ready to stop living inside it? And one by one, the unnecessary begins to fade. This is not erasure, it is refinement, letting the layers that have crusted over the heart soften, letting the emotions that linger, not because they're useful, but because they're familiar, finally leave, not pushed away, but bowed to and released. In this way, emptiness becomes sacred. It is no longer a void to fear, but a space to trust. A room inside you where breath moves freely, where thought doesn't echo so loudly, where pain passes through without taking root. The Heart Sutra doesn't say, get rid of form. It says, understand that even form, when deeply seen, is empty. Meaning, what you think you need to hold, what you think you are, can change. It is not fixed. It is not as solid as it seems. This applies to emotions too. You don't have to own every sadness. You don't have to explain every fear. You don't have to catalogue every doubt. You simply recognize that they are passing weather. And if the cup is too full, they stay longer. But if you allow emptiness, they drift. The body knows this truth. That's why it exhales. That's why it sleeps. That's why it lets go of breath again and again. Because release is not weakness. It's rhythm. It's wisdom. It's the natural movement of all things. And to resist that movement is to suffer. In Buddhist practice, this emptiness is not lonely. It is interconnected. Spaciousness connects everything. A room only holds what it holds because it is not filled with walls. Your mind only understands because it is not crammed with conclusions. And your soul can only rest when it is no longer barricaded by your own expectations. Letting the cup hold only space is an act of deep trust. Trust that you do not need more. Trust that you already are what you've been seeking. Trust that nothing added will bring peace, only what is released. Even joy becomes more vivid in emptiness. Because joy is not something you chase. It is something that rises naturally when there is nothing suffocating it. And when the soul is no longer drowning in demands, it begins to float. Letting go is not an event. It is a slow and sacred process. Some things leave easily, others return again and again. But even that return is part of the practice. Each time you meet it with gentleness, you thank it, you learn from it, and if you're ready, you let it leave. This does not mean you detach from all of life. It means you stop attaching meaning to everything that passes through. You stop collecting every feeling as a souvenir. You stop filling your heart with every headline, every memory, every ache. You begin to live like the sky again. You begin to feel like the breath, coming, going, never trapped. And the cup inside you, once filled with so many voices, begins to echo with silence. Not emptiness as lack, emptiness as freedom. So, as you lie here tonight, ask gently, what have I been holding too long? What story have I told too many times? What emotion am I ready to feel fully and let move on? Let those answers come slowly. Let them float up without force. And as they do, let them pour out. Let the cup be empty. Let the space remain. Let yourself know that in this emptiness, nothing is missing. Because when the craving stops, when the self-inventory fades, when the inner collector rests, that is where true fullness begins. Not by adding more, but by needing less. Not by doing more, but by allowing what is. Not by chasing peace, but by making room for it to arrive. And right now, the room is ready. The cup is clear, and nothing more needs to be poured in. And now that the cup holds only space, now that the mind no longer clings and the heart no longer overflows with what doesn't belong, a new kind of energy begins to reveal itself. Quiet, steady, unforced. It's not the kind of fire that demands to be seen. It's not urgency. It's not adrenaline. It's the slow, glowing warmth of something ancient and lasting. This is the strength that doesn't shout. This is compassion, not as a feeling that comes and goes, but as a source of gentle endurance that never burns out. In many Buddhist texts, compassion, karuna, is spoken of not as emotion, but as a fuel. It's not the soft, fragile kindness people often imagine. It is something much stronger, something that can keep you walking even when the path feels endless, something that keeps your heart open even when the world gives you every reason to close it. True compassion is not drained by effort. It replenishes itself with each act, like a candle that lights another without losing its own flame. This kind of strength does not come from motivation or mood. It doesn't depend on whether the day went well or whether people were kind. It comes from something deeper, a choice to stay soft when it would be easier to go numb, a decision to care without collapsing, a practice of holding space for others and yourself without turning it into a performance. Many confuse compassion with weakness, but in Buddhist tradition, it is one of the highest forms of power. Not power over others, but power within. The kind that lets you keep showing up, even in the presence of pain. The kind that lets you forgive, not because you forget, but because you don't want to carry the bitterness anymore. The kind that lets you listen without needing to fix, to witness suffering without becoming swallowed by it. The bodhisattvas, beings who vow to awaken not just for their own sake, but for all sentient beings, are often described as having compassion that spans lifetimes. Not a single act, not a burst of empathy, but an endless reservoir of care. This is what it means to endure gently, to love not with drama, but with discipline, not with loud passion, but with unwavering warmth. When you look at your own life, you can probably remember moments when your heart wanted to shut down, when pain felt like too much, when people disappointed you, when your own mistakes made you question your worth. And still, here you are, still breathing, still caring. That's the candle. That's the quiet strength that didn't burn out. That's compassion. It is not always grand. Sometimes it's as simple as offering a smile when you feel tired. Sometimes it's pausing to breathe instead of lashing out. Sometimes it's staying present in a difficult conversation. Sometimes it's forgiving yourself for not being perfect. These acts don't look like much, but they keep the flame alive. And what's important to understand is that compassion doesn't mean absorbing everyone else's suffering. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you are empty. That's not endurance, that's burnout. Real compassion includes boundaries. It includes care for the self. It says, I will show up, but I will not lose myself in the process. In meditation, there's a practice called metta, or loving kindness. It begins with sending care to yourself, not as selfishness, but as foundation, because you cannot sustain compassion for others if you are filled with self-hatred. You cannot offer calm if your own heart is on fire. You must tend to your own flame first. Then you can carry it into the dark for others. The Buddha once said that holding on to anger is like picking up a hot coal to throw at someone. You are the one who gets burned. Compassion is the opposite. It cools the coal. It turns fire into warmth. It transforms reaction into response. And the beauty of compassion is that it doesn't run out. The more you give, the more it grows, because it is not pulled from your energy, it's pulled from your awareness, from the still part of you that is connected to all things. And when you act from that place, you are not draining yourself. You are drawing from the same well that fuels the sunrise and the ocean tides. It is endless because it is shared. This is why monks who live with so little can give so much. They are not depleted by giving. They are nourished by it, because their compassion is not based on performance or reward. It is based on presence. It's not about saving others. It's about being with them. It's not about solving every problem. It's about refusing to turn away. And this endurance, this steady compassion, becomes especially important when facing the suffering of the world. It's easy to become overwhelmed, to feel powerless. But the candle doesn't ask you to fix the world. It asks you to stay lit, to stay warm, to be the one who doesn't go cold. Even your breath can become an act of compassion. When you breathe slowly and stay grounded, you send a signal to your nervous system. We are safe. And from that safety, you can offer calm to those around you. Your presence becomes a refuge. Your steadiness becomes a balm. In the long nights of grief, in the slow weight of uncertainty, compassion becomes your anchor. It doesn't promise that things won't hurt, but it promises that you won't abandon yourself when they do. And the more you practice this, the more you return to your breath, the more you soften your heart, the more natural it becomes. Compassion is not a technique, it's a way of being, and it's built in small moments. Choosing to breathe instead of react, choosing to listen instead of judge, choosing to rest instead of push, choosing to forgive instead of carry. These choices, repeated gently, create a life that does not harden, even when the world tries to make you. The candle that didn't burn out is not about never feeling tired. It's about knowing how to renew, knowing how to return to what matters, knowing how to keep the heart open without letting it break beyond repair. So tonight, let your breath be that flame. Let it burn quietly. Let it remind you that you are not here to race. You are not here to prove. You are here to endure gently, to soften in a hard world, to keep offering warmth, not in bursts, but in steady light. You don't have to give everything, just give presence. You don't have to be perfect, just be kind. And if you forget, if you close, if you react, that's okay. You return, you breathe, you light the candle again, because every time you choose compassion, even for a moment, the world becomes a little warmer. And so do you. Not by effort, not by strategy, but by remembering what you already are, a steady flame that knows how to stay. And now that the flame of compassion is lit and steady, now that your warmth is no longer conditional on what the world does or doesn't give back, you begin to see something even deeper. What happens when the world becomes chaotic? What happens when everything around you shakes, when certainty disappears, when emotion swells like thunder and the future goes dark like rain clouds? This is not about being gentle when life is gentle. This is about staying grounded when the winds howl. This is about learning from the monk who slept through storms. In one of the old oral legends passed through Buddhist monasteries, there was a monk who traveled alone through rugged mountains. He was known for never seeking shelter in temples, never waiting for calm weather, never delaying his path. When storms would roll in, lightning splitting the sky, wind tearing at the trees, rain flooding the trails, he would find the nearest cave, lie down, close his eyes, and sleep. Others who followed him once asked, "How do you sleep through this?" And his answer was simple: "Because I don't ask the storm to stop." This teaching is not about literal rain. It's about what happens when life becomes uncertain, when the world does not bend to your timing, when the ground beneath you feels unstable and the thoughts in your mind echo louder than thunder. The monk slept not because he was fearless, but because he understood one truth. Peace doesn't come from controlling the storm. It comes from finding shelter that doesn't depend on anything outside of you. The present moment is that shelter. It is not made of walls. It doesn't need to be quiet or easy, but it is always available. And yet, most people try to escape it, especially when it gets hard. The moment something becomes uncomfortable, mentally, emotionally, physically, the mind runs. It remembers the past. It predicts the future. It builds escape plans. But the monk's practice was the opposite. He entered the discomfort. He lay down with it, not because he enjoyed it, but because he trusted that nothing truly threatens you when you're fully present with it. Storms do not disturb the present moment. They only disturb our expectation of what the moment should be. This is the heart of the teaching. The pain is not in the rain. The pain is in our resistance to the rain, in the belief that it shouldn't be here, in the fear that it will last forever, in the desire to control what was never ours to control. But when you release that grip, when you stop demanding peace and start allowing the moment to be what it is, something strange happens. You start to feel safe, not because things are fixed, but because you stopped running. The monk who slept in storms knew that what passes through the sky also passes through the mind. Thoughts come, emotions swirl, memories crash, but they are weather. And just like the sky is never harmed by the storm, your awareness is never harmed by what passes through it. That is the real shelter, the unmoving center within you. And this isn't about pretending to enjoy suffering. It's about discovering that suffering grows when you resist the moment, and that it often softens when you meet it directly, when you lie down inside it without flinching, when you breathe into it without fighting, when you allow the wind to howl and let your breath stay steady anyway. One of the hardest things for people to learn in meditation is how to stay, to sit through discomfort, to breathe through racing thoughts, to remain in the center of their own experience when everything in them wants to leave. But the more you stay, the more you realize the storm doesn't break you, your resistance does. This is why mindfulness is called returning, not escaping into fantasy or future, but returning again and again to the moment as it is, without needing it to be different, without needing it to soften before you soften, without waiting for perfect conditions before you relax. The monk who slept in storms had no guarantee that the lightning wouldn't strike. He didn't meditate to make the storm go away. He just learned to rest beneath it, to find something deeper than safety, trust. Not that nothing bad would happen, but that whatever happened, he would meet it from presence, not panic. This changes everything, because now, when stress comes, you don't brace, you breathe. When fear rises, you don't tighten, you stay. When emotion shakes you, you don't collapse. You feel it all the way through, and you let it pass, because it will pass. The storm always passes. That's the nature of all things, the emotion, the thought, the panic, the noise. None of it stays forever. But the more you resist it, the longer it lingers. The more you accept it, the faster it moves through. So the monk's sleep was not unconsciousness, it was trust. It was the deepest form of presence. His body said, "I can rest even now." His breath said, "I don't need to rush away." His mind said, "This too is just passing weather." And this is the kind of presence that becomes unshakable. You may not be lying in a cave tonight, but the storms still come. The storm of too many thoughts, the storm of fear about tomorrow, the storm of regret about yesterday, the storm of loneliness, the storm of pressure. And the only way to rest through them is not to conquer them. It's to sit down in the center of yourself, breathe deeply, and stop asking them to go away. Let the storm be loud, you be still. Let the thoughts race, you slow down. Let the heart ache, you stay close. And in doing so, you become the shelter you were looking for. You become the stillness you thought was missing. You become the monk who doesn't need the storm to stop in order to sleep. This is not indifference. This is deep attention. This is bowing to the moment exactly as it is and saying, "You are enough." This is removing the condition that says, "I'll rest when things are calm," and replacing it with, "I'll rest because I choose to return here." This is not a one-time lesson. It is a lifelong practice. But every time you lie down and feel overwhelmed, remember the monk. Remember that presence is not created by silence. It is revealed when you stop chasing silence and sit down inside the storm. So, tonight, whatever is moving inside you, let it move. But you stay. Stay in your breath. Stay in your body. Stay in the moment, no matter how imperfect. And as the winds of thought and fear try to sweep you away, you stay rooted, not tense, soft, not numb, awake. Because nothing can uproot the one who no longer needs the sky to stay clear. Let the cave be your breath. Let the stillness be your bed. Let the present moment be your shelter. And rest. Not because the world is perfect, but because your presence no longer depends on it. And once you've learned how to stay inside the storm, once you've stopped resisting the moment and discovered peace that doesn't depend on calm weather, the body begins to surrender differently. Not from exhaustion, but from trust. Not as collapse, but as reverence. Because now, rest is no longer something you fall into. It's something you offer. It becomes more than relief. It becomes sacred. This is where we begin to understand sleep not as escape, but as devotion. In many Buddhist traditions, even rest is treated as a form of puja, a spiritual offering, not to please a deity, but to align the heart with humility. It's a way of saying, "This too I give back." The breath, the body, the thoughts, the tension, all laid down like a candle before the altar of life. Not because you're tired, but because you're grateful. And this subtle shift, from sleep as a need to sleep as a gift, transforms the entire act. Most people see rest as downtime, a break from responsibility, a necessary pause before the next round of doing. But Buddhism invites a different view. It teaches that everything, when done with awareness, becomes part of the path. Washing a bowl, walking down a path, closing your eyes. If done with presence, each becomes an act of return, a way of saying, "Here I am again." And what could be more sacred than the moment the body softens and the mind dissolves into trust? To offer sleep as puja means entering rest not with resistance, but with ritual. It begins with intention. Before you lie down, you pause. You acknowledge that this moment is not separate from your practice. You don't crash into the bed. You arrive in it. You don't abandon yourself as you fall asleep. You meet yourself at the threshold. You say, in silence or out loud, "May this rest serve more than my body. May it restore my heart. May it offer something back to the world." This doesn't have to be religious. It doesn't need incense or chanting. It needs sincerity. It needs awareness. The smallest gesture can become sacred if you meet it with depth. Even the way you place your head on the pillow can become a bow. In many monasteries, monks close their eyes with their palms together, not for show, not out of superstition, but as a reminder. This is not just sleep. This is surrender. This is the letting go of striving, the pause of self-definition, the silence after a day of seeing, judging, reaching, fixing. And in that pause, something larger is allowed to hold you. The body knows how to rest, but the heart often doesn't. It's filled with guilt, with thoughts of unfinished business, with doubts about whether it has earned rest. This is why treating sleep as an offering changes everything. You are no longer trying to deserve rest. You are dedicating it. You are saying, "Let this be part of the path. Let this be useful, even in stillness." This is a powerful antidote to the modern world, where rest is often seen as weakness, where being tired is treated like a failure, where sleep is something you fight to earn rather than something you bow into. But in Buddhist thought, rest is a part of right effort. It's not lazy, it's wise. It restores the clarity that effort depends on. Transforming sleep into devotion also softens the mind's grip. When you enter rest as a ritual, you no longer obsess over the outcome. You're not trying to force sleep. You're not measuring the hours. You're simply offering yourself into rest, the way a flower offers itself to the sun, without expectation, without force, just a quiet unfolding. Even the breath participates. It slows not out of exhaustion, but out of trust. It no longer pushes, it receives. And in that receiving, the nervous system understands. Nothing is being taken. Nothing is being lost. This is not withdrawal. This is return. In Tibetan teachings, they speak of sleep as a teacher of death, a rehearsal for the great letting go, but not in a way that's frightening, in a way that's freeing. Each night, we release identity. We stop holding names, stories, judgments. We dissolve. And if we can do that with presence, then even death becomes less terrifying, because we've practiced it 1,000 gentle times. And when sleep is done with reverence, it becomes a form of love, not just self-care, but world care. Because the more rested you are, the more peace you offer to others, the less reactive you are, the more space you have for compassion. So your rest is not selfish, it's service. The way you close your eyes at night becomes the way you carry your heart during the day. If you sleep with resistance, your waking hours will feel tense. If you sleep with surrender, your waking hours will feel open, not because sleep fixes everything, but because it recalibrates the soul. This is why the Buddha encouraged his disciples to be mindful in every posture: sitting, standing, walking, lying down. Rest was not an exception. It was part of the path. The body lying down is not falling away from awareness. It is deepening it. And so, tonight, as you prepare for sleep, ask yourself gently, what would it feel like to offer this rest instead of collapse into it? What would it feel like to make this moment part of your practice instead of a break from it? Maybe you place your hand on your heart. Maybe you whisper words of gratitude. Maybe you exhale with the awareness that even this breath is enough. You don't need to recite mantras. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be sincere. Let the bed become your altar. Let your stillness be the incense. Let the softness of your body be the chant. And let the act of rest be your offering, not because you've done enough, but because being is enough. This changes the way you wake, not with tension, but with grace. You don't rise as someone who just survived the night. You rise as someone who gave something sacred to it. And so, rest now. Not because the world is quiet, but because you've made peace with yourself. Not because you've earned it, but because you were never meant to prove your worth through exhaustion. Sleep not to escape, but to return. Sleep not as delay, but as devotion. You are not separate from the sacred. You are part of it. And when you sleep in that remembrance, even the night becomes a prayer. Even silence becomes an offering. Even stillness becomes love. And once rest has been offered as devotion, once the body has been entrusted to stillness and the night received with gratitude instead of exhaustion, something even quieter begins to rise. A question that doesn't shout, but lingers softly in the breath. What becomes of all the gentleness we've given, all the kindness that was never noticed, all the softness that was offered without reward? The answer comes like a whisper carried by the wind. What you send out softly returns softly, not always when you expect it, not always from where you gave it, but it always finds its way back, just like a feather drifting slowly through the sky, circling its way home. In the Buddhist view of karma, not all return is immediate, and not all seeds bloom where they are planted. Sometimes you smile at a stranger and they never smile back. Sometimes you forgive someone who never knows they were forgiven. Sometimes you help quietly and the world moves on without noticing. But that energy, soft, clear, unforced, it doesn't disappear. It moves, it travels, it lands in places you may never see. And one day, when your soul most needs peace, it returns, not because you demanded it, but because softness always circles back. This is what's known in some teachings as the karma of gentleness. It's not the karma of reaction, where pain causes pain. It's not the karma of great deeds that bring recognition. It's the karma of softness, of the small, often invisible actions that create subtle harmony in the heart, the kind that seems too small to matter until you realize it was the only thing that ever made your spirit feel safe. In daily life, people are often drawn to intensity, loud change, strong opinions, visible achievement. But in Buddhist monasteries, the deepest practice is often the most silent one, sweeping the floor slowly, offering water without speaking, bowing without expecting to be seen. These are not just customs, they're ways of shaping the mind through humility, through presence, through softness that expects nothing yet transforms everything. And this softness, when practiced consistently, creates a kind of karmic pattern that protects the soul. It does not shield you from hardship, but it surrounds you with clarity. It doesn't prevent pain, but it gives you a quiet strength when pain arrives, because every soft action becomes a thread in the net that holds you when you fall. Even thoughts carry this energy. A quiet wish for someone's peace, even if you never say it aloud. A prayer for someone you no longer speak to. A gentle memory that you allow to arise without bitterness. These, too, are feathers released. And what returns is not always what you expect, but often exactly what you need. Many people grow impatient with soft paths. They want change now, healing now. They want to see their efforts bloom like fireworks. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us what is loud fades fast. What is gentle lasts long. Water wears down rock, not through force, but through steady presence. Kindness reshapes karma not with spectacle, but with consistency. This teaching is not about being passive. It's about being skillful, about choosing your energy wisely, about knowing that when you respond to harm with gentleness, you don't become weak, you become free. Because you are no longer letting others decide the state of your mind. You are no longer mirroring harm. You are creating something new. And that creation returns in ways you may not see, but always feel. Think of the times you were met with unexpected kindness. A stranger holding a door. A friend sending a message when you needed it most. A teacher giving you time when you didn't ask for it. These are not random. They are the feathers that floated back, sent by others who once gave softly, and now, without knowing it, helped carry you through. And you too have been that feather for others, in ways you'll never fully understand, in words you forgot you said, in small decisions you made that shifted someone else's day. That is the quiet miracle of softness. It creates change without demanding recognition. It ripples out without needing to be traced. And when you rest in this understanding, your practice becomes deeper than self-improvement. It becomes alignment with life itself. Softness doesn't mean never saying no. It doesn't mean staying silent when something matters. It means acting from clarity instead of reactivity. It means choosing love without needing it to be returned in a specific way. It means trusting that the more your heart gives freely, the more the world begins to respond in kind, slowly, gently, and often when you've forgotten you even asked. The karma of softness also includes how you treat yourself. Every time you forgive yourself instead of punish, every time you choose rest over pushing, every time you speak to yourself with tenderness instead of criticism, that, too, becomes a feather. And these self-feathers often take the longest to come home, but when they do, you begin to feel safe in your own presence. You begin to trust your inner voice again. You begin to see that healing was never about force. It was about patience. There is a story of a monk who walked barefoot across a cold mountain path each morning to collect water for the Sangha. He never spoke of it. No one asked him to. He simply did it, year after year. And in his final days, as his body weakened, the same students who once slept through his walks began carrying him to the river instead. No grand speech, no repayment demanded, just the gentle return of what he had once given without need. This is the rhythm of soft karma. It returns when you're no longer chasing reward, when you've already let go, when your heart has moved on. And then, without warning, peace appears, not as a trophy, but as a presence. A quiet sense that things are okay, that you are okay, that the world is not as cruel as you feared, that love has roots in places you forgot you planted. Tonight, as your breath slows, notice the softness you've sent into the world, whether or not it was noticed. Let it return in feeling, not in memory. Let it hold you without needing explanation. Let it remind you that kindness is never wasted, that peace is not built in a day, that every quiet gesture mattered more than you realized. Let this awareness settle into your bones. Let it become part of your rest. And let each breath be a feather you offer back, weightless, sincere, and full of life. What floats away with softness always finds its way back, not to the mind, but to the soul, where it was always meant to land. And now that the feathers of softness have returned and settled quietly into the soul, now that you've begun to feel the peace that flows not from effort, but from intention, the next teaching asks for even less. Not because less is better, but because less is truer. Not because silence must be created, but because silence already exists beneath what is stirred. The question is no longer how to achieve calm, but how to stop disturbing what is already still. This is where we enter the lesson of the lake that never asked to be still. In Buddhist practice, the idea of stillness is often misunderstood. People think it means stopping thought, removing emotion, emptying the mind by force. But these are just new forms of agitation, new ways of stirring the water while telling ourselves we're trying to calm it. Real stillness, the kind that arises from awareness, doesn't need to be manufactured. It reveals itself when we stop trying to manage everything, when we stop stirring the surface and begin to trust what lies beneath. A lake becomes still not because it tries to still itself, but because the wind stops. And the wind stops when it is no longer being fed. Fed by judgment, fed by resistance, fed by the constant desire to be somewhere else, feel something else, become someone else. But when attention is placed gently and consistently on what is, on the breath, on the body, on the present moment, the wind quiets, and in that quiet, the lake reflects perfectly. This reflection is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of the mind as clear and luminous. Not clear because it is always empty, but clear because it no longer clings. A mind that clings creates waves. A mind that allows creates space. This is not about effort. This is about alignment. The water does not struggle to settle. It only needs to be left alone. But the modern mind is trained to interfere. It's trained to optimize, to fix, to improve, even in meditation. You sit down to rest, and immediately there's a plan. Be calm, focus more, eliminate that distraction. The mind, trying to be still, becomes more restless, like stirring the lake to make it clearer. But Buddhist teachings remind us, clarity comes when we stop the stirring. This is why awareness is not about control. It's about inclusion. You do not remove what's present, you allow it. You let the fear sit. You let the boredom breathe. You let the noise pass through. And in that allowing, your presence deepens, and the waters begin to settle, not because you made them, but because you stopped interfering. Even emotions respond this way. Anger flares because we argue with it. Anxiety spikes because we fear it. But if you stop trying to fix the feeling and simply give it space, it starts to soften. It moves like weather across the lake, passing without leaving a mark. You don't need to fight it. You only need to stay. This is why monks don't try to achieve peace. They prepare conditions for peace. They sweep, they walk slowly, they chant, they breathe. And these simple acts are not to create silence. They're to stop disturbing it. They're to return the body and mind to the natural rhythm that already contains stillness. It's easy to believe that calm is rare, that it must be hunted down in retreats, in special routines, in silence so deep the world disappears. But calm is not rare. It is buried under habit, buried under reactivity, buried under thought loops that say, not this moment, not yet, not like this. But the moment you stop feeding those loops, the lake starts clearing. You don't need to wait for a better time. You don't need to wait until your life is simpler. The stillness you seek is not in the conditions. It's in the quality of attention you bring. If your breath is present, if your awareness is kind, if your effort is dropped, the water reflects what's real. This changes your relationship with discomfort. You stop trying to make everything feel okay. You start trusting that even the messiness belongs, that you don't need perfect control to feel safe. You only need to stop stirring what was never yours to fix. You begin to realize that peace doesn't require removal, it requires space. And when you give space to your thoughts, to your body, to the people around you, something surprising happens. The frantic energy begins to fade. Not because you forced it out, but because it was never meant to stay. Like a storm that loses interest when there's no resistance. The lake doesn't resist the rain. It doesn't resist the sun. It reflects whatever comes. And then it returns to stillness. You can live this way too. You can respond without clinging. You can experience without becoming. You can allow without absorbing. That's the calm that doesn't leave you, because it was never outside you. Buddhist presence isn't about always being peaceful. It's about always returning. Returning to what is true beneath the movement. Returning without needing the movement to stop. Returning with breath, with awareness, with softness. Not as a strategy, but as a way of remembering what you are. You are not the wave. You are the water. So as you lie here tonight, let yourself stop stirring. Let the thoughts come without pushing them away. Let the body rest without adjusting it to perfection. Let the breath move without needing to guide it. Trust that stillness is not something you'll find. It's something you'll uncover when you stop searching. Let the lake be your mind now. Deep, still, waiting. Not because you've conquered anything, but because you've released the need to conquer. And in that release, the water clears, the wind fades, the reflection returns, and peace is not given, it is revealed. And now that the lake has been allowed to rest, now that the surface reflects without effort, and the silence reveals itself without demand, the next understanding doesn't arise from stillness. It vibrates from within it. It isn't loud, it doesn't move through the ears, but it's deeply felt, like the hum of something sacred that doesn't need to speak to be heard. This is the bell that rings without sound, the tone of your inner life, a quiet resonance that can guide you deeper than words ever could. In Zen poetry, there's an image often repeated: a bell that rings, yet no sound is made. It's not a contradiction. It's a symbol for presence that is so complete it no longer needs to be announced. A peace so rooted it doesn't show itself through silence or through speech, but through the feeling it leaves behind. The people who carry this tone don't always look peaceful. They don't have perfect posture or slow, deliberate movements, but something in their presence feels safe. Something in their energy doesn't ask questions. It gives answers without needing to say anything. This is what it means to develop an inner tone, not a persona, not a performance, but a deep and natural rhythm that you carry into the world. It's shaped not by what you say or how you present, but by how you hold what's inside. You could be in a loud city, a busy room, a difficult conversation, and still carry this resonance. You could be in conflict, in grief, in fatigue, and still carry it. Because it doesn't depend on mood, it doesn't rely on control, it is born from practice. This tone is not taught the way speech is taught. You don't rehearse it, you return to it. Every time you sit in stillness, every time you meet a feeling without judging it, every time you choose to breathe through difficulty instead of react, you are tuning that bell, and slowly its sound, though silent, begins to move through your body, your thoughts, your life. It becomes the energy you enter a room with, the way people feel after they've left your presence. Not because you fixed them or said something profound, but because you were settled. Because your nervous system spoke the language of calm without needing to explain itself. In Zen, the greatest teachers often taught the least. They sat, they walked, they lived their lives in alignment, and that became the teaching. Their tone was the message, their silence louder than words, not because they had no thoughts, but because their thoughts no longer carried them away. They let thought arise and fall like wind through reeds, and what remained was the hum beneath it all. This hum lives in everyone, but most don't hear it because of the noise they build around it. Plans, regrets, expectations. But if you sit long enough, quietly enough, kindly enough, you begin to feel it. A kind of inner warmth, a resonance that doesn't ask you to become anyone else. It just reminds you of what you are when you're not trying so hard. This tone is not something you produce, it's something you allow. It's what arises when effort is dropped, when the need to sound wise is replaced with the willingness to be real, when the need to fix your mind is replaced with the courage to befriend it. It doesn't mean your life will always be quiet. It means you will no longer depend on quiet to feel whole. You begin to carry silence with you. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not numbness, but presence. The kind of presence that makes people pause without knowing why. That makes you breathe deeper without trying. And this inner tone becomes especially powerful at night. When your thoughts want to review the day. When your body wants to carry tension into sleep. when your mind wants to fill the silence with analysis. Instead of fighting all that noise, you return to your tone. You let it ring, not as sound, but as sensation, as breath, as the echo of something still and undisturbed. There are nights when your thoughts will be loud, but the tone will still be there, beneath them, supporting you like a hand you can't see but always feel. That's the gift of this practice. The tone doesn't compete with thought, it outlasts it. And how do you find this tone? You don't chase it, you don't analyze it. You meet yourself with presence, again and again. You listen to the silence beneath your breath. You feel the way your chest rises, not to fix it, but to notice it. You become aware of the part of you that's always been listening, even when the rest of you was distracted. The bell rings in that space, and when your tone becomes familiar, it starts to reshape your reactions. You stop responding from panic. You stop needing to defend. You begin to listen more, to need less. You speak more slowly, but only because you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're rooted, not because life became easier, but because you became less tangled in it. This tone becomes the rhythm of your relationships. You stop pulling people in. You stop pushing them away. You simply resonate, and those who feel safe in your tone stay. Not because you tried to keep them, but because they remembered themselves in your presence, and you in theirs. There's an old Zen saying, "When the bell is struck, the mountain answers." Meaning, when your tone is real, the world responds in kind. Not always instantly, not always predictably, but deeply. That tone becomes your offering, not a performance, a presence, not a message, a way of being. And when you carry it into sleep, it becomes the final offering of your day. You don't need to summarize your progress. You don't need to recount your mistakes. You just rest in that tone, letting it hum beneath the surface, letting it hold you, letting it echo in your breath until the breath becomes deeper than thought. This is not metaphor. It is felt. And once it's felt, it is never forgotten. So let the bell ring now, without volume, without story. Let your body hum with the memory of peace. Let your soul echo without words. Let the night carry you, not into escape, but into that quiet resonance that never leaves. The bell that rings without sound is already ringing inside you. All you have to do is stop speaking and feel it. And now that the bell has rung without sound, now that its silent tone has settled into the body like a hum beyond language, there's no need for more volume, more explanation, or more answers. What lingers is not a conclusion, but a feeling, an echo that speaks without requiring a single word. And this is what leads us into the next teaching, the wisdom of not needing to finish the story, not needing to control the plot, not needing every question to resolve before rest can begin, because peace is not the end of the story, it's the space where the story is allowed to keep unfolding. In many Buddhist traditions, stories are not told to reach a point. They are told to reveal something deeper than a point, something alive, shifting, open-ended. Unlike many modern narratives that demand closure, Buddhist storytelling invites you to sit with the part of the tale that never quite lands, the part where the meaning is not certain, where the ending is not tidy. Not because life is incomplete, but because it was never meant to be wrapped up like a solved equation. There is a Zen koan that goes like this. A monk asked his teacher, "What is the meaning of life?" The teacher replied, "Rice in the bowl, water in the pail." That's it. No explanation, no philosophical answer, just daily life, just what is. The story ends not with clarity, but with presence. And in that presence, the need for explanation dissolves. This is one of the most difficult teachings to absorb, that you don't have to fix the story of your life in order to find peace. You don't have to rewrite the past. You don't have to figure out the perfect next chapter. You don't have to explain every emotion or make sense of every experience. You are allowed to be a story that tells itself. The mind is trained to edit constantly. This shouldn't have happened. I should be farther along by now. Why did I do that? But each of these thoughts is an attempt to grab the pen and rewrite what has already been written. And the more you do that, the more you pull yourself away from the page you're actually living. The more you analyze the plot, the less you live the moment. Buddhist practice teaches that the narrative mind, the part that always needs to label, summarize, and resolve, is only one layer of awareness. Beneath that layer is something quieter, not a narrator, a witness, a presence that doesn't need the story to be different. That presence doesn't ask, "How does this end?" It simply asks, "What is this right now?" And in that shift, the urgency drops. The need to control softens. This doesn't mean you stop caring about your life. It means you stop squeezing it into a shape. You stop demanding that every relationship makes sense. You stop needing every choice to be justified. You begin to allow the beauty of a chapter that doesn't need to lead to a climax. You begin to sit with the middle of things, the changing of things, the mystery of things, and not treat any of it as a problem. The story that tells itself is never rushed. It unfolds at its own pace, sometimes with clarity, sometimes with confusion, sometimes with deep love, and sometimes with loneliness. But when you stop measuring how it's supposed to go, you start living it fully. You begin to notice small details that would otherwise be missed. The weight of your breath, the texture of quiet, the way one feeling dissolves into another, the way no scene lasts forever. And in Buddhist storytelling, even the ending is never really the end. One tale flows into another. One teacher's lesson becomes the seed of a student's practice. One silence carries more depth than 100 explanations. The story is not there to define you. It's there to awaken you. When you try to fix the plot, you are saying that the present moment isn't enough, that something must be added or removed for it to be worthy. But the more you practice mindfulness, the more you realize everything that's happening now is the story. There is no destination to reach before peace can begin. Peace begins the moment you stop rewriting and start listening. Even your mistakes are part of the story, not side notes, not accidents, just sentences that didn't go the way you expected. And maybe they never needed to. Maybe their value isn't in how they ended, but in what they revealed while they happened. Maybe the version of you who existed in that chapter was exactly who you needed to be to learn what you know now. The practice, then, is not to become the perfect author of your life. It's to stop resisting the authorless nature of it. Life is writing itself through you, moment by moment, breath by breath. You are not the entire book. You are the page that is being written right now. And that page doesn't need to make sense to be sacred. This also means you don't have to know how the current moment fits into the bigger picture. You don't need to force meaning onto what you're feeling. You don't need to solve the plot twist before you can rest. You can simply say, "This is where I am in the story," and let that be enough. And when you begin to see it this way, rest becomes easier. Not because everything is clear, but because clarity is no longer a requirement for peace. You stop fighting with your mind about what should have happened. You stop demanding that your emotions be tidy. You stop arguing with your own timeline. You lie down not as someone who failed to resolve things, but as someone who finally gave permission for life to be what it is. You allow your breath to carry you without needing to narrate where it's going. You feel your body resting into the mattress, not as an act of surrender, but as a continuation of the story. The chapter that ends not with punctuation, but with presence. There are many stories in Buddhist texts that don't resolve. A master offers a cryptic answer. A student bows and walks away. A moment passes, and nothing more is said. Yet something deep is understood, not in the mind, but in the heart, in the place where meaning doesn't need to be named, to be felt. This is how your life becomes a sacred text, not because it is flawless, but because it is true, because it is lived with awareness, because it no longer resists its own unfolding. So, tonight, let the story continue. Let the unanswered questions stay open. Let the past remain unwritten. Let the future come without scripting it in advance. Let the plot be unpolished, incomplete, full of pauses, and let it be beautiful in its lack of resolution. You don't need to write the ending, you only need to live the sentence you're in. Let it breathe, let it be ordinary, let it be honest. And trust that the story knows where it's going, even if you don't. The story that tells itself was never lost. It was just waiting for you to stop interrupting it. So now, breathe and let the next line arrive. And now that the story is no longer being forced to make sense, now that the plot is allowed to breathe and unfold without your constant editing, something subtle begins to emerge. A kind of quiet light. Not the blinding light of conclusions or breakthroughs, but the soft, flickering kind that shows up when you're not looking for it. A light that doesn't ask to be chased. This is where the next lesson begins, not in search, but in sight. Not in achievement, but in attention. The firefly path waits for those who are finally done trying to light up the whole world at once. In the deep forests where monks retreat to live in silence, there are no city lights, no glowing street lamps to depend on, and often there are no answers either, only the soft, open questions of nature. At night, the only lights that dance through the trees are fireflies, small, brief, unreliable in the traditional sense. And yet, they are enough. The monks do not chase them. They sit and watch. They allow those flickers to guide their eyes, their breath, their practice. Not because they show everything, but because they show something. And something is always enough, if you're not demanding everything. This is the heart of the teaching. You don't need a grand awakening to feel alive. You don't need permanent clarity to move forward. You don't need a spiritual explosion to be at peace. What you need is to learn how to rest in the little lights, the ones that come and go, the ones that appear just long enough to remind you, you're not lost. Most suffering doesn't come from the dark itself. It comes from the belief that there shouldn't be any darkness, that life should be lit up at all times, that understanding should be constant, that comfort should never fade. But life doesn't work that way. Insight comes like fireflies, brief and beautiful. And if you're rushing through the forest, chasing them with a net, you miss the entire experience. Buddhism doesn't promise constant light. It doesn't give you a lantern to carry for the rest of your life. It offers something simpler and more honest, the ability to sit with the flickers, to trust the little glimpses of truth, to accept that not every moment will be lit, but every moment can be lived. This shift is radical, because it means you stop searching for the one big answer. You stop exhausting yourself trying to feel right all the time. You stop needing to be certain before you rest. Instead, you look for the light that's here, however brief, however incomplete. You trust that the next step doesn't need a spotlight, just a flicker is enough. The firefly path also teaches humility, because it reminds you that light is not something you make. It's something you receive. And the more you try to force it, the more you chase it away. That's what anxiety is, in many ways, a frantic reaching for illumination, a fear that if you don't understand now, you never will. But the monks who walk slowly through darkness know better. They know that the light comes in its own time, and until it does, the dark is not an enemy. It's simply part of the path. And this way of moving changes your relationship with confusion. You stop needing to resolve everything immediately. You stop asking, "What does this mean?" over and over. You start asking, "What is here right now?" Because maybe all that's here is a breath, or a moment of quiet, or a feeling that doesn't need to be fixed. And that, too, is a kind of light, a moment of awareness that flickers and then fades, but still leaves something behind. There's an old saying, "The eyes adjust to the dark," which is another way of saying you don't need more light, you need more stillness, you need more patience, you need more willingness to stay where you are without turning on a flashlight. Because the inner eye, the one that sees what really matters, doesn't need everything to be clear. It just needs everything to be real. And what's real is often small. A kind thought, a steady breath, a moment of letting go. These are not huge events, but they are fireflies, and if you sit with enough of them, the path becomes visible, not all at once, but enough to keep going. This is why monks often repeat the same chants every morning, not because they need something new, but because repetition creates rhythm, and rhythm is light. Rhythm is what allows you to feel held, even in uncertainty. It reminds you that you don't need to reinvent yourself every day. You just need to return, to sit, to breathe, to notice the flickers and let them guide you without grasping. You also stop comparing your journey to others. You stop looking at people who seem fully lit and wondering why your path still feels dim, because you understand now they too are following fireflies. They too are trusting the flickers. The difference is that they've stopped expecting the forest to turn into a stadium. They've learned to love the dark as part of the process. And when you begin to see this way, life gets quieter. Not dull, quiet. You begin to move more slowly. You begin to speak with more care. You begin to treat each feeling as something sacred, even if it's painful. Because now you're not trying to fix the mood. you're looking for the light within it. And the more you do this, the more your mind starts to relax. It no longer searches constantly. It no longer panics when things go dark. It trusts that light will return. Maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not when you expect, but it will, because the nature of life is to flicker. Let that be enough. You don't need to know what comes next. You don't need to figure out the entire forest. You just need to keep noticing the fireflies. Keep breathing through the silence. Keep pausing long enough to let the next flicker find you, because it will. The path you're on doesn't need to be clear to be true. It doesn't need to be lit to be sacred. It only needs your presence, and your presence doesn't need perfection. It just needs practice. Daily, gently, quietly. So tonight, rest with the fireflies. Let the light come in small ways, in the breath that doesn't need to be deep, in the thought that passes without judgment, in the silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Let these be enough. Let the flickers guide you, not to some final destination, but to this very moment. This inhale, this pause, this soft understanding that the light you've been chasing might already be here, not as a flood, as a spark. And when you wake tomorrow, don't search for clarity. Wait for it. Listen for it. Trust that it will return in its own time. And until it does, walk the path with your hands open, with your eyes soft, with your heart ready to receive even the smallest glimmer, because that's how the firefly path works. Not all at once, just enough. Always just enough. And now that the fireflies have faded into the dark, now that the soul has learned to trust flickers instead of chasing floods, a new kind of surrender begins to unfold. Not a letting go of hope, but of edges. Not a disappearance, but a soft dissolving into something wider. Something that no longer needs to be called me. The next teaching comes not with insight, but with spaciousness. This is where the raindrop meets the ocean, not with panic, but with peace. In the Buddhist tradition, the teaching of anatta, no self, is one of the most profound and difficult truths to accept. Not because it's complex, but because it challenges the very thing we've been told to build our lives around: identity. The idea of a fixed self, a personality, a history, a name, a center of control. But the deeper the practice goes, the more it becomes clear what we call self is not a solid thing. It's a collection of passing conditions, thoughts, emotions, memories, habits, patterns arising and falling, like clouds, like waves, like everything else. To hold tightly to this me is to create friction. Every insult hurts more. Every mistake becomes shame. Every success becomes pressure. But when the boundaries of self begin to soften, when the illusion of separation starts to fade, something unexpected happens. You don't disappear, you expand. You don't vanish, you merge. The pain is still there, but it's no longer personal. The joy is still there, but it doesn't need to be claimed. The moment is still here, but now it's held by something wider than thought. There is a story told in many Buddhist circles of a raindrop falling from the sky, fearful of what will happen when it hits the ocean. What will become of me? It asks. Where will I go? But when the moment comes, when it finally touches the vastness of water below, there is no pain, no loss, just return. The raindrop doesn't vanish, it remembers. It remembers it was always water, that the sky was never separate from the sea, that the falling was never a mistake. This is the wisdom of anatta, not the destruction of self, the loosening of it, the softening of its outlines, the understanding that what you truly are is not the voice in your head, not the image in the mirror, not the biography you carry. What you are is experience unfolding, a process, a breath, a field of awareness within which 1,000 things appear and disappear. And in this realization, so much pressure lifts. You don't have to fix the self. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to prove it. You don't even have to know what it is. You can just let it flow, like a river, like breath, like a raindrop carried by gravity into something so much bigger. This doesn't mean you stop functioning. You still use your name. You still speak your thoughts. But you no longer believe you are those things. You no longer tie your worth to how well your story holds up. You begin to act, not from identity, but from presence, not from ego, but from compassion. Because when there's no self to protect, there's more space to care. The teachings often say that clinging to self is the root of suffering, because it divides the world. It creates inside and outside, us and them, success and failure. But the raindrop that finds the ocean no longer sees those lines. It feels them dissolve, and in their place is not confusion, but belonging. This is why monks bow, not because they are small, but because they are vast, and bowing reminds them. Bowing reminds the mind to get out of the way. Bowing returns the body to humility, to the understanding that what we bow to is not a god, not a rule, not even a teaching. We bow to life itself, to the movement of all things, to the ocean that holds the drop. When you begin to live this way, the sharpness of self begins to round out. You stop thinking in terms of my experience, my achievement, my suffering. You start seeing everything as part of a larger unfolding. Someone else's smile feels like yours. Someone else's pain stirs compassion, not distance, because the wall between me and them has grown thin, not erased, but breathable. This breathing space is what allows rest, because the self is exhausting. It demands maintenance. It demands proof. It worries constantly. Am I doing enough? Am I respected? Am I seen? But when you stop feeding it, the questions fade, and in their place is silence. Not emptiness, but fullness without boundaries. The raindrop does not mourn what it loses when it joins the sea, because it gains something far greater. The freedom to move without needing a name, the freedom to change without breaking, the freedom to be part of something that doesn't collapse when the story ends. And so tonight, if your thoughts are clinging to identity, if your mind is asking, who am I? Or, am I enough? Breathe, not as yourself, just as breath. Let the boundaries blur, let the roles fall away, let the story pause and feel what's beneath all of it. That feeling, open, wide, spacious, is not nothing. It is everything. It is awareness without label. It is consciousness without container. It is what remains when you no longer need to be someone. And it is peaceful, not because it's passive, but because it's free. You'll still wake up tomorrow. You'll still put on your name, your habits, your preferences. But maybe you'll wear them more lightly. Maybe you'll remember they are costumes, useful, temporary, not the whole of you. The whole of you cannot be seen. It cannot be captured. It cannot be pinned to one story. It is vast. It is formless. It is the field in which all things arise and pass away. And knowing this, you no longer need to chase importance. You no longer need to defend your opinions like territory. You can listen more. You can soften more. You can let others be right without it making you wrong. Because there is no you to be defended, only a moment to be met. So let the raindrop fall now. Let the ocean receive it. Let the edges dissolve, not as failure, but as fulfillment. You were never meant to stay in the sky. You were always meant to return, to rejoin, to become something bigger by letting go. And when the self lets go, even for a moment, you'll know it, because the breath will deepen, the weight will lift, the world will feel wider, and your heart, finally unburdened, will say quietly, I was never apart. I was always part of the sea. And now that the raindrop has melted into the ocean, now that the self has softened into something wider than name or history, the next lesson comes not as a thought, but as a pause, a long, quiet exhale, a space where nothing needs to be declared, justified, recorded, or remembered. Not because nothing happened, but because it no longer needs to be proven. This is where we find the scroll that was never written. Not blank from neglect, but from freedom. A freedom born from no longer needing to show the world who you are. There is a deep peace that lives just beyond the hunger for explanation. It rises only when you no longer feel the need to account for your existence, when your life no longer feels like a resume, when your memories stop acting like exhibits in a courtroom, when each moment stops asking to be witnessed, posted, or retold. It is not the absence of meaning, it is the presence of silence where meaning once had to shout. In Buddhist monasteries, this freedom is felt in the simplest moments. No one asks what you did before you arrived. No one cares what your future goals are. The identity you wore out in the world is quietly set down at the gate, and in its place you become just a body, walking, sweeping, eating, sitting, breathing. Not because you've been diminished, but because you've been allowed to stop performing. You become someone who no longer needs to explain. This is not loss, it is arrival. There is an old saying among forest monks, the most sacred pages are the ones left blank. Because some wisdom doesn't need to be written, it doesn't need to be documented, it only needs to be lived and then released. Some stories nourish you once and then dissolve. Some insights are meant to vanish after they touch your heart. Trying to capture them only pulls you out of them. The modern world is obsessed with proving you're enough, proving you're right, proving your experience was valid. But Buddhist presence teaches a different rhythm. The rhythm of letting go before the proof is gathered. The rhythm of doing the right thing, not because it will be seen, but because it aligns with your heart. The rhythm of living deeply, then turning the page without saving every line. This is where rest becomes possible, not because you've finished everything, but because you've stopped proving anything. There is a strange exhaustion that comes from constantly translating your life into language. You feel something profound, and immediately the mind asks, how do I explain this? How do I post it? How do I make it meaningful to others? But the moment you do that, you leave the experience. You enter the role of the narrator. And while storytelling has its place, not every moment needs to become a message. Some of the most powerful truths cannot be told. They can only be known. They don't translate into paragraphs or punchlines. They rise like breath, fill you for a while, then disappear, leaving behind only a quiet shift in how you walk, how you see, how you care. The scroll that was never written is a symbol for the soul that no longer needs to archive its becoming. And this does not mean your life has no meaning. It means the meaning no longer depends on performance. It means the depth of your experience doesn't require documentation to be real. It means you trust that you are real, even if no one claps, even if no one records, even if no one remembers. This is the peace the monks carry in their eyes. It is not detachment. It is the absence of proving. It's the way their steps touch the earth without leaving a mark, and yet the world is changed by them. It's the way they love, not through declaration, but through stillness, through presence, through attention that asks for nothing in return. In your own life, you may notice how often your mind wants to prove. Let me explain what I meant. Let me show you why I matter. Let me remind myself that I've accomplished something. These are all forms of grasping at self-worth, grasping at memory, grasping at identity. But when you step back, when you let the scroll remain unwritten, you feel a new kind of freedom. The kind that lets you enjoy a moment without sharing it. The kind that lets you learn a lesson without turning it into content. The kind that lets you rest deeply because you're no longer performing even for yourself. This is not giving up on expression, it's giving up on pressure. You can still speak, still create, still write, but you no longer do it to earn your place. You do it because it arises naturally from presence. And if it disappears the next moment, that's okay, because you're no longer trying to hold it all together, because the scroll you were trying to fill was never required, because the story that truly matters is already being lived, and it does not need to be recorded to be complete. In meditation, this is felt as a pause, a moment when thought fades and no narrative rushes in to replace it. No internal voice narrating, no self to comment on the self. Just space. And in that space, you begin to realize that the absence of narrative is not emptiness, it's liberation. You do not need to keep explaining who you are. You are already here. You do not need to keep convincing yourself that you are enough. You have always been. So as you rest tonight, let the scroll remain blank. Let the breath be the only sentence that repeats. Let the body lie down without needing to understand everything it has carried. Let the mind release its need to sum up the day, to label it as good or bad, meaningful or wasted. There is nothing to prove in this moment. Not to anyone, not even to yourself. Let the thoughts come and pass. Let the body sink and be held. Let the silence return and stay. Let this night be enough, even if you say nothing about it tomorrow. Even if it changes you in a way no one sees. Even if it writes no story. Even if the only trace it leaves is a softness in how you speak to yourself in the morning. The freedom is here, in the scroll that was never written, in the heart that no longer needs to be read, in the presence that needs no caption to be sacred. And now that the scroll has been left blank, now that the need to explain, prove, and preserve has dissolved into the quiet space of just being, what's left is even lighter. Not an emptiness that aches, but a weightlessness that frees. A stillness not fixed to any label. The breath becomes quieter, the steps softer, the journey less personal. This is where we begin the next teaching, not about moving faster nor achieving more, but about releasing even the identity of the one who walks. Because when footsteps vanish, the path becomes limitless. In the Theravada forest tradition, monks wander without attachment to destination. They don't walk to arrive, they walk to return, not to a place, but to presence. And in doing so, they dissolve one of the deepest illusions in the human mind, that there is a someone walking through time, building meaning, leaving a mark. The more they walk, the more the idea of self begins to thin, until finally there are only footprints in the soil, and even those vanish in the wind. This is not about disappearing from the world. It's about disappearing from the constant need to define yourself within it. It's about letting go of the belief that your value is tied to your direction, your destination, or your ability to leave something behind. Because the deepest peace doesn't come from knowing who you are. It comes from no longer needing to. The mind builds identity from motion. I am the one who achieves. I am the one who heals. I am the one who struggles. But what if there is no one? What if life is not a line from here to there, but a circle of moments unfolding on their own? What if walking becomes sacred precisely when it leaves nothing behind? This kind of walking is not aimless, it's awake. Each step is not a means to an end, but a full expression of presence. You don't walk for meaning. You walk for the miracle of walking. You don't move to become someone else. You move to remember that you never were a fixed thing to begin with. And as identity softens, the mind becomes quieter. You stop narrating your journey. You stop watching yourself live. You stop checking in to make sure you're still becoming something. Instead, you move like wind through trees, like breath through ribs, like time through memory, effortless, undemanding. There's a phrase spoken by many forest monks. No trail, no traveler. It means that when ego drops, the path does not disappear. It becomes infinite. When the need to be someone fades, all of life becomes available. Not just the peaks, but the plains. Not just the milestones, but the steps in between. Most people are exhausted not by the walking, but by the weight of who they think they're supposed to be while walking, by the mental script that says, am I succeeding? Is this the right path? Will this matter later? But when those questions are allowed to fall away, the silence that remains is not hollow, it's liberating. You begin to notice things you never had time to see before. The shift of light on the floor, the sound your breath makes when you're not thinking, the way even pain has a rhythm that doesn't need to be resisted. You stop sprinting toward legacy. You start moving like water, unconcerned with leaving a name, a mark, a trace. This is what it means to walk without identity. Not to deny your humanness, but to stop clinging to the story of it, to stop holding so tightly to the I that needs recognition, to stop walking just to be remembered. Because in Buddhism, the highest form of being is not the one who stands out. It's the one who dissolves into the whole. This dissolving doesn't mean you vanish from your relationships or your responsibilities. It means you stop confusing your roles with your reality. You can be a parent, a teacher, a partner, without being trapped by the image of any of those. You can walk among people without constantly adjusting how they see you. You can breathe without shaping your breath into something impressive. This is not a withdrawal from life. It is a return to it. It is stepping back from the mirror. It is releasing the need to decorate the reflection. It is realizing that every time you stop trying to be somebody, you become available to everything. And with that availability comes rest, a kind of rest that no sleep can give. The rest of no longer striving to make your life impressive. The rest of letting go of the idea that your worth depends on what you accomplish. The rest of walking with no audience, not even yourself. In forest meditation, some monks walk slowly in circles for hours, barefoot on the earth, eyes soft, breath even. They don't chant. They don't count steps. They don't measure progress. They walk for the sake of walking. And in that rhythm, something opens. Not a doorway to answers, but an escape from the prison of me. The longer they walk, the more the boundary between walker and path disappears. The earth is no longer beneath them. It holds them. The body is no longer a vehicle. It becomes part of the journey. And the mind stops asking, "Where is this going?" because it no longer needs to escape where it is. You too can live this way. Even if you never wear robes, even if you walk busy streets, even if your calendar is full, you can move through the world with less grasping. You can drop the need to always evaluate yourself. You can let your footsteps fall without naming who they belong to. And this is where freedom begins, not on mountaintops, not in retreats, but in ordinary moments walked without performance, in days lived without branding, in conversations where you no longer play a part. You just show up as breath, as body, as presence. When identity becomes too loud, the soul cannot hear itself. But when it fades, even for a while, everything comes alive. The sky is no longer background. The moment is no longer a means. Each blink, each breeze, each silence becomes sacred. So tonight, let your steps vanish. Let the roles drop. Let the mask rest. Not because you failed to be someone, but because you've seen through the need to be. Let your breath guide you, not to another version of you, but to this exact moment, free, undefined, whole. There is nothing to become, only something to return to. There is nothing to prove, only something to trust. There is no one to walk, only walking itself. Let that be enough. Let that be everything. Let the path carry you, not toward identity, but into the space where footsteps vanish, and all that remains is life unfolding through you, with no name, no story, and no need to be more than this. After more than 3 hours of walking gently through teachings older than memory and deeper than thought, the mind is quieter now. The weight you carried may not be gone, but it's softer. It breathes easier. What once felt like a mountain now feels like something that can be sat beside. These weren't just stories. They were invitations to let go, to listen, to stop chasing and start returning. One breath at a time. You were never asked to fix yourself. You were only asked to be present. Not to erase pain, but to stop clinging to it. Not to become someone else, but to rest in the someone less space that's been waiting under all your trying. From rivers that didn't rush to monks who slept through storms, from silent bells to unwritten scrolls, the message whispered through each teaching was the same. Peace is not something you find, it's something you stop disturbing. When you no longer stir the waters, the reflection becomes clear. So let this night carry you. Let the teachings fade without needing to remember every word. What matters will remain, not as memory, but as tone. A feeling in the breath, a stillness behind your thoughts, a softness in how you rise tomorrow. And now that your soul is soothed, if these teachings touched something in you, leave a comment below and write, "Stillness is enough." It's not just a sentence, it's a small bow to the journey you just took. And if you'd like to keep walking this quiet path with us, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss a step. Until next time, rest well, breathe gently, and carry peace like a lamp in your chest.